This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Happy Independence Day, America. Since I am going to be taking off tomorrow, we are going to be doing a rare Thursday, very special holiday edition of
The Other Side of Midnight proudly presents Ask Frank.
Ask Frank anything.
Ask Frank anything.
Ask Frank anything.
Ask Frank anything.
Oh yes, if you usually listen to this program on a Thursday or whatever day it is, and you don't typically hear our Friday program, you are in for a treat, because for the next hour, I will do my best to tackle your questions on absolutely any subject. All you have to do is dial 646-720-0635. That is 646-720-0635. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to have all the answers, but if you want to know my opinion about something, if you need advice about something, if you want to know a factual issue about my personal history, something I've seen, something I've observed, or why I came to a certain opinion, or you want to ask me a hypothetical question, now is the time. All you have to do is dial 646-720-0635, and whoever comes up with the best question in the eyes of our illustrious staff, which today consists of Tony and Elias, we will give you a prize from the Other Side of Midnight online store. But since there's only two of them, not our usual three, if there's a split vote, if they are divided as to who has the best question this hour, then I will be the tie-breaking vote. So that is my prerogative as the host of this program. So whatever you have questions about, let me hear them. 646-720-0635 on this Independence Day edition of Ask Frank Anything. I will begin with Jacqueline in Brooklyn. Hello, Jacqueline.
Good morning, Frank. The other day you were talking about how Christine Quinn and Mike Bloomberg were able to get the city council to approve a third term for Mike Bloomberg to run for mayor. What I'd like to know is that still in effect so that anyone can have a third term? And does it only apply to the, I guess it does only apply to the city of New York, since it was the city council that changed that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And for people listening around the country that don't know what Jacqueline is talking about, let me just give a little bit of context. So what happened in New York was we had a term limits law that the people voted on twice, and it came as an initiative from the people. They collected signatures. They passed it overwhelmingly, and then the politicians wanted another term, so they put it on the ballot again, and they put it on the ballot in a very confusing manner, meaning they put it on the ballot in a manner that if you vote no, you really mean yes. If you vote yes, you really mean no. And yet, even with that, the voters still adopted it a second time 3 years later. So Mike Bloomberg, who had always been a proponent of term limits and always supported term limits, he decided he wanted a third term, and shockingly, so did all the members of the city, not all the members, but most of the members of the city council that were poised to be term limited, including the speaker, Christine Quinn. So instead of putting this on the ballot and saying to the people who might have voted for this, they said, instead of saying, look, we're in a financial crisis, we really need the current leadership to stay in power just one more term, the very same people that were having kittens when Mayor Giuliani wanted just an extra 90 days, the very same people that did that, they broke every rule in the book to have the state legislature, the city council and the city legislature overturn the will of the voters and implement term limits. And what makes this so outrageous, Jacqueline, and this is where I'm coming to the answer to your question, and I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but people in St. Louis, Minneapolis, Las Vegas, they may not know the history. What they did was the very next year, the mayor appointed a charter revision commission to change the law back. And they changed it back to 2 terms. So there will never be another mayor that gets to serve 3 terms. That was a law that was passed only for Mike Bloomberg and Christine Quinn. As soon as they got their 3rd term, they changed it back for everybody else.
But the city council could do that again if they chose to.
They actually could. And I'm in the midst of making some recommendations to a current charter revision commission that says they shouldn't be able to do that. But right. They challenged this in the courts, and the courts upheld the fact that the city council can override the will of the voters. Yes, they
only
could
in
do
New York.
it. Yeah,
only in New York.
Unfortunately, you're right, Jacqueline. Thank you. All right, 646-720-0635. Quite a few open lines today. I guess people were not prepared for us to do Ask Frank Anything on a holiday, and that's fine. If people don't have any questions, then I will move on to other stuff that I want to talk about. 646-720-0635. James calling from Vancouver, our neighbor to the north. What's your question, James?
Yeah, happy 4th of July. Mr. Morano, my grandparents landed on Ellis Island around 1920, and they spoke Hungarian. Now, the English alphabet is 26 letters. The alphabet in Hungarian is 44 letters. Do you think that in 1920 they had Hungarian typewriters at Ellis Island to make sure that all Hungarians got their names spelt with the 44 letters?
No, I'm guessing they didn't. But they would have had to buy a ticket in Hungary when they were processed to get on the ship to come to Ellis Island,
right.
And whatever name they bought that ticket under in Hungary, that's the name that they would be known by in the United States.
But would the people in Ellis Island be able to pronounce the name?
There was no.
Changed.
Yeah, James. No, they didn't. I mean, and everybody thinks of it because you could say that, but the research doesn't back that up. The historical record doesn't back that up. What you hear is family lore about this. Oh, my grandfather's name got changed. My uncle's name got changed. My father's name got changed. And because this has been passed down generation after generation, and because this was featured in The Godfather Part 2, people think this is the case. But no, I've because I had relatives that came through Ellis Island, and I always wondered how come none of their names got changed. And I have not just me, but real scholars of history have researched this, and no one's name was changed, altered, shortened, butchered, or written down wrong at Ellis Island or any American port. It's a myth. It's one of many American myths because the names on the ship's manifests that immigrants brought to Ellis Island were the original names given by the immigrants before sailing. So whatever name they gave before booking their ticket, that's the name they used. Now, some of them may have changed the name on their own to become more Americanized or to have a simpler name or to have a new start. But clerks at the shipping line station in Europe wrote the names in the manifest, sometimes without asking for identification to even verify the spelling. And steamship agents, they went with whatever name the ticket was bought under. But I appreciate you asking the question again, James. 646-720-0635. 646-720-0635. Plenty of open lines on this edition of Ask Frank Anything. So if you've ever dreamed of having a question asked on the radio of me, now's your opportunity to win a prize. Paul is in Massapequa. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Frank, how you doing?
Great.
I know you're into history, and so I'm taking notes right now off of YouTube on some Revolutionary War things for a presentation tomorrow morning, but I figured
What kind
I
of
know that
presentation?
you might have some good facts you could add for that I could take some notes on.
What kind of presentation are you doing?
Oh, well, I teach yoga, and so I have a yoga class, like specifically for the 4th of July tomorrow morning, and so I want to just be able to give a little bit of content on what we're celebrating, because I decorated the whole studio, and so I just want to just have quick facts to give throughout the class to keep the theme going, because I made a playlist.
I love this. So what's your question specifically?
Well, basically, just I know like some of the major people were George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and like the crew he assembled. So what would, I guess the question could be, what would be your favorite aspect of the Revolutionary War and like the things that went down in it?
Are you familiar with the fate of the signers? What became of all of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence?
Well, all I know is that 2 of them died on the same day on the 50th anniversary, and I thought that was weird. But I was also amazed that they lived to be like 83 and 89, all the way back then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you heard the interview that I did with Lindsay Sherminsky on this yesterday, but yeah, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, they both died on the 50th anniversary. And by the way, those were 2 people. It's interesting that we're doing this again with Biden and Trump, but those were the first 2 presidential opponents to run against one another twice. They ran against one another in 1796 and in 1800, and it's happened a couple other times, obviously with a few other folks. But so I think it's always so interesting because there were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, and 5 of the signers were captured and tortured by the British, and 12 of them had their homes ransacked and burned. 9 of the people who were delegates to the Second Continental Congress fought in the Revolutionary War and died from wounds or hardship. 2 of them lost sons serving in the war, and 2 of them had sons captured. And I don't have the exact number, but several others who were wealthy before the war died penniless. So I always think that's such an interesting thing when you look at what became of the 56 men that signed the Declaration of Independence. Most of them, obviously we know John Adams' name, we know John Hancock's name, we know Samuel Adams' name, we know Thomas Jefferson's name, but most of them did not get to become Benjamin Franklin in history. Most of them had real problems, and it was a sacrifice that they were willing to make for their country, or for a new country. And it was really just such a superhuman thing. So you can look up online, if you just Google the fate of the signers, it tells you about, who did what and what became of whom. And I always think that's a really interesting factoid, along with the fact that, as you point out, Jefferson and Adams died on the 50th anniversary of the signing.
Well, thanks a lot for that. Definitely going to check out that page. And,
if you email me, Paul, I mean, look, you just have to, especially today, I'm sure with Google, it'll come right up. If you just Google the fate of the signers, something will come up that has the details of the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence.
All right. I so appreciate that. I'm with a buddy right now who's a first-time listener, and if you're light on phone calls, he would be happy to ask you a question. If
he's got a good question, he's certainly welcome to call back. Thank you, Paul. All right, 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. Walter is in Montreal, again, our neighbor to the north. Hi, Walter.
Well, let me shout out to Paul out in British Columbia and be the second Canadian to wish you a happy July the 4th. My question, Frank, is as follows. Given the vaccine mandates, do you think, in retrospect, that the world is a better place for what we went through?
I absolutely...
And has had a positive impact on society?
In retrospect, through the benefit of hindsight, my answer is absolutely not. I think and look, I say this as someone that was vaccinated and boosted. I think the vaccine mandates contributed to an increased polarization and division within society rather than just allow people to make their own choice for what they thought was going to be the best decisions for their health. The mandates led to these incredible divides between those who supported them and those who opposed them. A friend of mine is a nurse and with a master's degree, very well qualified. And they had, in the hospital she was working at, they had a vaccine mandate, and she was able to somehow get away with not getting vaccinated. She didn't want to get vaccinated because, that was her choice. She was young and healthy, and she made the calculation that that she would be okay if she got COVID. And her other fellow nurses, I'm not sure how she was able to find this loophole to not get vaccinated, but her other fellow nurses, they didn't know that she was unvaccinated and refusing to get vaccinated. So they would talk to her like anybody else was, like she was vaccinated just like everyone else was. And this one nurse said to her, and this was 4 years ago, but my friend said she never forgot it. This one nurse who she'd known for years, who she considered a friend, said to my friend, she said, if someone doesn't get vaccinated and they end up hospitalized, we should be able to refuse them any treatment. It's not right that they should be so selfish and not get vaccinated, and we have to treat them and potentially risk getting sick ourselves. And it is such a simplistic and, pardon me for saying this, idiotic way of looking at things, because now, given what we know about the vaccine, and this is where I really take issue with folks like Dr. Fauci and others, we were initially told that this was going to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It was not true. Most of the people that were getting COVID after the vaccine, they were vaccinated. We were told that if you were vaccinated and you were with someone else that was vaccinated, your chances of spreading the disease was minimal. That turned out not to be true. I really think in retrospect, the best strategy would have been to let people make their own choices and not try to force these people with the threat of losing their jobs or not being able to go to a restaurant to get vaccinated. Instead, put out why getting the vaccine was good and let them make their own decisions. So I think it was an incredibly divisive thing for every place that had it. And I think it led to an erosion of trust in public health institutions that we're still trying to recover from to this day. And I didn't even get into the economic impact. The mandates led to job losses, economic disruption, and a lot of legal and ethical concerns. So my answer is enthusiastically no. I think the mandates were a very, very poor choice. All right, 646-720-0635. And now we have one open line, 646-720-0635. Let me say hello to Pete in Piscataway. It's that away. Hello, Pete.
Hi, Frank. I know this is one of your favorite movies. Are you going to carve out some time this weekend and watch 1776 with William Daniels and the group?
I am planning on it. A lot will depend on the weather. I do like to watch it on the 4th itself, but the problem with the movie, and it's great, it's one of my favorite films, is it's 2.5 hours long. So, I have a pretty busy day. One, I am going to have to get some sleep after the show. I'm going to try and make it to the parade. I am going to my friend Jerry's barbecue. I'm going to try and stop by my dad's at some point, and I have some plans with some friends this evening. I'd also like to try and watch the hot dog eating contest. So I don't see when I can carve out the 2.5 hours, but maybe it's something that we can do Thursday night after we put Carmine to bed, and then maybe continue on Friday night. But yeah, it's one of my favorite films, and it is by far my favorite musical. And unlike a lot of historical musicals, Pete, and if you've seen it, I'm sure you know this.
I got to record it, Frank.
Yeah, no, right. Me too. Yeah. It is pretty accurate historically. Obviously, people didn't sing and dance their way through debating the Declaration of Independence, and obviously there's some condensing of certain characters. But by and large, the facts and the dialogue, even, it's pretty accurate historically, and I really do get quite a kick out of that film. Thank you, Pete. 646-720-0635. Mike is in New Jersey. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Frank. Given the political climate the last few years and people talking about tyrannical government, the people are supposed to turn against a tyrannical government if it comes to that, and the military is supposed to be on the side of the people, but the military is supposed to be in civilian control, which is why the president is the commander-in-chief. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, if the military does turn against the government in a tyrannical government, who becomes the commander of the U.S. military?
Well, that's the very definition of a constitutional crisis, right? And that's why military coups, the likes of which they might have in a place like Bolivia, are to be avoided at all costs. I mean, that's a big part of the problem, right? I mean, and this is kind of the problem I have with the toxic nature of our politics these days, is you have everything is all or nothing for everybody, and everyone's of the opinion that if their side doesn't get in, that all is lost. And you have a situation where if you lose an election, you feel like you can't even respect the results of the election or whomever emerges as the winner of those elections. And, I'm reading, and thank you for the call, Mike. I'm reading a very good book now called The Two-Party Doom Loop by Liz Rattoballi. And putting aside whether two parties are the best system or the worst, he gets into, and he quotes a lot of other scholars, that once folks believe that their political adversaries are enemies to be destroyed, that's my phraseology, not his, all is lost, right? That's pretty much what happened in the 1930s with Spain, with the Spanish Civil War. So once you get to the point where you think violence is the only way because your side didn't win electorally, all is lost. So there's no answer to your question because there's no provision in the country that says, in the Constitution, there's no provision that says, all right, if the military turns against the government, who becomes in charge of the military, right? I mean, it would be whatever general orchestrated that coup, presumably. But that's why these military coups are to be avoided. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. BJ is in the Queens. Hello, BJ.
Hello, Frank. Happy 4th of July.
Thank you.
God bless. Everyone's weighed in, but I don't know what the great master of midnight's thinking is on the Democrat ticket at the top. Who will replace Joe if he is to be replaced? If you think that, and also who will be his running mate. I think it's going to be Kamala, and I think Governor Brillcream from California will come in. What do you?
Well, meaning you see it as Harris being at the top of the ticket and Newsom as the vice president, or vice versa?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I don't see that just because they're from the same state, and that would mean they wouldn't be able to get the electoral votes from California unless one of them moved to a new state. So I don't see that. So and I could see either of them being on top of the ticket. Now, and thanks for the call, BJ. Obviously, I have no idea who the Democratic ticket will be. I do think it's a certainty that Biden is not going to be on the ticket. And he shouldn't be. If you're a Democrat, you can't want Biden to be on the ticket. If you're an American that cares about the future of the country, you can't want one of the two major party nominees to be someone that is seemingly so out of it as President Biden is. So what direction do we go? There is a strong case to be made for Kamala Harris, meaning for if you're a Democrat on a practical level. There's a polling reason to go with Harris. According to the latest CNN poll, Harris does better against Trump than Biden does. There is a financial reason to go with Harris if you're a Democrat. Harris, unlike the other candidates, could have relatively easy access to the $240 million that the Biden-Harris campaign war chest has raised. Every other candidate, including Newsom, would have to start pretty much from scratch. And, if you look at her record, she could credibly run on the popular parts of Biden's policy record. things like healthcare, tax policy, infrastructure, without being hobbled by questions about Hunter Biden, without being hobbled by issues like Biden's age, without having to answer questions about the Afghanistan debacle. So she can claim all the popular parts of the Biden presidency and ignore all the rest of it. So I think she is the top tier contender, honestly, at this point. As for who would be a good running mate, I think it probably has to be a white male. I think Pete Buttigieg has got to be in the mix. I think someone who doesn't get talked about as a presidential candidate, but who's, I think, a terrific senator and would really add a level of intellectual depth to the ticket is Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democratic senator from Rhode Island. I think the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, would be a great running mate for her. I think the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, would be a great running mate for her. Let's say they don't put Harris at the top of the ticket. Then I think it's clearly Newsom who is the favorite. I don't know how you get Harris off the ticket at this point, but if she's not on the ticket, if they put her on the Supreme Court, or I don't know that you could do that actually, but if you make her governor of California, then I think a Newsom Whitmer ticket would be relatively strong. They don't have a lot of the negatives that President Biden has going for him. And, somebody that I think would be a very good running mate for Harris, and I don't think they would pick him, but I think it might have been in his head, which is why he was out there yesterday praising Harris, would be the former congressman from Ohio, Tim Ryan, an Ohio kind of moderate Democrat that is pro-labor, that is pro-making stuff in America, like a Sherrod Brown or a Tim Ryan. I think that would balance out the ticket pretty effectively and, make a case to a lot of Trump supporters that like the made in the USA nature of the Trump tariffs and stuff, that maybe they'd have a home in a Harris-Ryan administration as well. 646-720-0635. We'll continue with Ask Frank Anything straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Oh, beautiful, far heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, make God thy gold refine.
The great Ray Charles singing God Bless America. This is not only a very patriotic song today, but this is a birthday bumper music request. Sorry, my microphone has a mind of its own. From my friend Assemblyman Robert Auth, who is a New Jersey Assemblyman, a great guy and a good friend. And he's celebrating his birthday today. So happy Independence Day to everybody, but a happy birthday to Robert Auth. We are in the midst of
The Other Side of Midnight proudly presents Ask Frank.
Ask Frank anything. Ask Frank anything.
Ask Frank anything. Ask Frank anything.
646-720-0635. Whatever you have questions about baseball, cocktails, Atlantic City, pro wrestling, cinema, television, hypothetical questions, questions about my history, anything you'd like to know, I will do my best to answer. 646-720-0635. Angel is on Staten Island. Hello, Angel.
Yes, good morning, superstar Frank Morano.
Morning.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Easiest question I've gotten all day.
Okay, my question is, sir, when you have no family and no friends, what's a reason? What's a good reason to keep on living?
If you have no family and no friends, what's a good reason to keep on living? Well, one, I think, are you in this position? Do you have no family and no friends?
I have no family and friends like come and go. You know how friends come one day.
One, I think no matter how old you are, no matter what position you're in, physically, mentally, emotionally, you can always make friends. Sometimes it's more difficult because of the circumstances, so you can make friends. But let me take your question as it is, rather than try and reword it. I think it would be self-improvement, learning, and experiences. If I was in that position and leading basically a solitary existence, I would use that time as an opportunity to read every book that I've been interested in reading, to try to watch every film that I've been interested in watching, to try to travel to places that I've never been, to try to learn new skills, and to use the fact that, because look, a family is great and friends are great, but as somebody that has a fairly large family and a very large group of friends, I can tell you that as great as they are and as rewarding as it is, it's also a bit of a burden because it's an incredible time commitment. So if I didn't have a family, I would be able to get a lot more other stuff done. I would rather take the family, don't get me wrong, but I think I would use it as an opportunity for self-improvement, to exercise, to learn about meditation, to maybe learn a musical instrument, a foreign language, to become an expert in something. I would use the fact that I'm free in terms of time to experience new things, to learn new things, and try to make myself better, and then try to maybe make some sort of, depending on your interests, some sort of a creative footprint. Maybe write something, whether it's a poem, a short story, a book, a research paper, or even just a letter to somebody that you admire. The fact that you don't have any friends or family, it does give you the time to write a handwritten letter to a lot of different folks, and that really does count for a lot with folks. So that's my best advice, Angel.
That's amazing, Frank. That's really such great advice. And I love you, and I think you're an incredible human being. And God bless you, and have a happy 4th of July.
That's awfully nice of you, Angel. You too. And you can consider me your friend. Even though we only know each other through radio, consider me your friend. All right, 646-720-0635. Charles is listening on KMOX in St. Louis, one of the best radio stations in America. Hi, Charles.
Hello, sir.
Hello, I love that
Independence
voice.
Day, first of all.
Likewise.
I got a question. How is it that somebody can run for the president of the United States and be the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the world and be a convicted felon?
Well, I mean,
if it was any other man other than him, Joe Blow off the street, how in the world can they do that? And he's in charge of the entire country.
Right. Well, look,
I don't get.
It's a fair question, Charles. And we've had presidential candidates. So just so I understand the scope of your question, is your question a constitutional and a legal one, or is it a moral, ethical, and a practical one?
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Okay. Well, let me do the best that I can with that. So there's no prohibition constitutionally on being a felon and running for president. Eugene V. Debs ran for president. He was thrown in prison pretty much for opposing World War I, and he ran for president from prison. Got over 1 million votes, I believe, in that election. And I think that was in 1920. Then Lyndon LaRouche, he went to prison for mail fraud and then ran for president multiple times after that. So there's no prohibition. Why isn't there a prohibition? I think the founders, and and I tried to stress this a little bit in my conversation with Lindsay Sherminsky yesterday, the founders were not monolithic in their thinking. You had some that would be considered very left-wing, some that would be considered very right-wing, some that were a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the founders who put in the constitutional requirements to be the president, that you had to be 35 and born in this country, they, I don't think, thought that the people that were selecting the president at the time would ever select someone that was a convicted felon. I also don't think that they expected the kind of crimes that Eugene V. Debs and others that have been convicted of over the years to become crimes. So I think that your question actually, in some ways, is a continuation of the question that I was trying to answer earlier about the military. Is we have a certain portion of the country who has totally lost faith in a big part of America's institutions, meaning Trump supporters don't believe in the court system. They don't believe in the criminal justice system. And that's honestly incredibly dangerous. But because that institution has no credibility in their view at all, they don't really hold that against President Trump at all, the fact that he was convicted. So, and you know what? I would rather have the voters decide. Let the voters decide if they want a felon or if they want someone who is clearly battling some sort of issue in terms of cognitive ability. Or do they want some sort of a third choice? It's a good question, though, Charles. Thank you. 646-720-0635. I'd love to get some non-political questions as well, because what happens when you start answering these political questions, then it begets more political questions. Let me say hello to Joel in Manhattan. Hi there, Joel.
Hi, Frank. I have a non-political question for you.
Lay it on me.
Okay, it's a theoretical, situation. You are a producer, and you're going to put on a Broadway show. All right, you have 3 films from the past that you're going to put on as a musical. 3 possibilities. You have to choose one. And of whichever one you choose, then you're going to have a first act and a second act, and you're going to incorporate classic bands, either past or present. They're going to do the first. One's going to do the first act, and the other's going to do the second act. The shows for opportunities for doing are Godfather, or Apocalypse Now, or Taxi Driver.
So I'm picking. It's a musical or just a Broadway play in general?
No, it's going to be a Broadway musical.
Okay.
Not a play.
Yeah.
You're going to do it as a musical. So it's,
All right. Well, out of those three, I could see them all actually working as a play. But out of those 3, I'm picking The Godfather because I think there's just so much more opportunity for great musical numbers with Johnny Fontaine and the wedding scene and the courtship of Apollonia. I think there's so many great opportunities for wonderful music, and there's so many wonderful songs in the film already that I think a lot of them would be adaptable to the stage.
Right. And who would you have? What bands, past or present, classical or whatever, would you put in there to do the first act, and then the second act would be a different one?
I would try to go with somebody that has mastered standards, maybe a modern crooner, someone like a Michael Bublé for the first act.
Okay.
I think that would fit in well with the theme. And then for the second act, I would go a little bit in a different direction, maybe more in a rock and roll direction. I'll say maybe something like they're not quite rock and roll, they're more glam rock, but something like the Scissor Sisters. Have you ever heard the Scissor Sisters?
No, is it anything like Bowie or from his
kind of. It's a little bit more modern and a little bit more out there. But I would just love to hear the mix of some whacked out songs like from the Scissor Sisters with a story that's from the 40s and 50s like they have in the Godfather. It's a wonderful question though, Joel. 646-720-0635. I'm going to take a quick break and then I'll continue with your question straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
I hopped off the plane at LAX with a dream, my cardigan. Welcome to the land of fame excess. Am I gonna fit in? Jumped in the cab, here I am for the first time. Look to my right and I see the Hollywood sign. This is all so crazy. Everybody seems so famous. My tummy's turning and I'm feeling kinda homesick. Too much pressure and I'm nervous. That's when the taxi man turned on the radio and the Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. So I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Nodding my head like yeah. Moving my hips like yeah. Got my hands up to play my song. You know I'm gonna be okay. Yeah. It's a party in the
It is a party in the USA, as the great Miley Cyrus said here. By the way, I got a text here from a friend of mine, a close friend, who clearly did not like my answer on the vaccine mandates. He asked me, what medical school did you graduate from? Which medical journals have published your evidentiary findings? Let me be very clear. Not only when I'm talking about medical issues, but legal issues, political issues, sports issues. I don't have any expertise in anything. I want to be very clear about that. And the fact of the matter is most of the people on the radio don't. So lest anyone take what I'm saying too seriously about anything, I don't have information. I don't have any sort of special training or expertise about anything. 646-720-0635. But when I'm giving my opinion here, it's just that. It's my opinion. It could be an uninformed opinion, but it's my opinion. All right. 646-720-0635. All right. Now we have 9 people on. I'm going to try and run through these as quickly as possible. Let me say hello to Keith in Manhattan. Hi, Keith.
Hey, Frank. Great to talk to you again. I have a question about the Founding Fathers. I would love your opinion on it. But real quickly, I wanted to answer the fellow's question about not having any family or friends. Get a charity. I mean, I've been out spay-neutering cats and rescuing homeless cats. I've met so many wonderful people in Harlem. I'm an Upper West Sider. Just find something that you can contribute to, and you will make so many great friends.
And it's a good point. I would also think there's a lot to be said for if people have strongly held political beliefs to consider working on a political campaign because it's a great way to connect with people as well. But Keith, give me your question because I want to try and run through as many of these as possible.
Real quick. I never hear this discussed, but the Founding Fathers were born into an age where slavery existed. Mm-hmm. Like quarterback Vic was born into a place where dog fighting was accepted. It wasn't like they invented it. And it was very hard, when you're born into a system, you accept most of what's going on around you. And 100 years from now...
Keith, if you could just get to your question quickly, just because I want to try and get to some folks here.
Well, I mean, I'm not excusing them, but I mean, don't they get, a little, 100 years from now,
Keith, I'm going to do my best to answer what I think is your question. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think it's impossible to judge people that lived in the 18th century by the standards of the 24th century. And there's a lot of people that were working towards ending slavery that lived at that time. Ben Franklin formed the first anti-slavery society on this continent. So, I mean, different founders had different views on slavery, and those that were forward-thinking and progressive enough to know that slavery was wrong, good for them. But, and I'm not excusing, as you said, anybody that had slaves. It's a horrible institution. But, that was the norm in the world at that time. 646-720-0635. Igor is in New Jersey. Hello, Igor.
Greetings, Frank. The saying goes that absence makes the heart grow fonder. So what do you think you've missed the most during Matt Blaze's absence this week? And will you give him a hug and a kiss when he comes back?
I didn't even realize until you just mentioned that Matt wasn't here. No, I will not give Matt a hug and a kiss. Elias and Tony have done a great job. If I had to pick two things that I miss about Matt, and Matt is he's a great guy to work with because there's no drama and he doesn't bother me. Neither do these guys, Elias and Tony. There's no crisis. There are other people that work here that are very nice people. Some on air talent, some behind the scenes. But when they see me, a lot of times they want to have a whole conversation. Hi, Frank. How are you? Hi. Oh, great. We're going to have a great show today. That's great. Great. What are you doing for the holiday? That's great. Now, they're being friendly. They're being polite. But I am trying to do 5 hours worth of work in 55 minutes. So I need to be left alone. And Matt does leave me alone. But what I miss about Matt most are the two issues are, he has a very good sense of timing. He is able to pull up a music bed or a drop very quickly. It's almost like it's almost become an extension of him just because he's used to it. And that's one thing. And then, he is able to kind of fix things. We were trying to record something before and it took us a while to figure out what was wrong. And I have a feeling that if Matt were here, he would have figured that out earlier. So he does know the technical aspect very well, but he also has a very good sense of timing. 646-720-0635. Let me say hello to Zach in Brooklyn. Hello, Zach.
Hey, Frank. Happy 4th of July first.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. All right. Angel kind of stole my thunder, but why are we here like humans? Like why? Why are we here?
Again, I'm not sure if you're looking for more of a scientific or a philosophical explanation or an answer.
Philosophical more.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, if you believe in humanism, they focus on the potential for human beings to lead ethical lives, fulfilling lives based on compassion and reason, without any sort of reliance on religious doctrine. If you go the religious route, in Hinduism, they say life's purpose involves fulfilling one's duties and then seeking truth. Christianity believes we're all here to serve God, basically, and to glorify God. I have no idea, but I'm glad we are here. I'll just say that, and we haven't always been here. If the history of the world was a volume of encyclopedias, and you take the whole history of the world it's a 26-volume encyclopedia, the time that humans have occupied on this earth would be just the last page of the last book. That's how little time humans have been here. So I don't know why we're here. No idea. I don't know. It's the most honest answer I can give. But I'm glad we are. And, hopefully we can make the most of it while we are. All right. Sean is on Long Island. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Frank. How you doing?
Good.
First-time caller, first-time listener.
Welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you. So studying a little bit about the Declaration of Independence, and it was basically a statement that we the people have unalienable rights that have been forsaken, and so like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So I was wondering if you had your alternative to those, some unalienable rights that the people have.
Well, the inspiration for that particular portion of the Declaration was from John Locke. John Locke, who was an Enlightenment thinker, said it was life, liberty, and property. I kind of like Jefferson's flourish on it more. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I don't know that I don't know that I'm going to add anything to that, Sean. I'll stick with Jefferson's 3. I think those are pretty good. I know that's maybe not the kind of creative answer you were hoping for, but I'll go with those 3. Hey, those of you that are holding, if you want to be grandfathered in, I'll get to you next hour. Meantime, Tony, do you have a winner?
Yeah, Elias and I picked Angel.
Angel, call back and we will give you a little bit of a prize. For everybody else that's holding, if you want to hang, I'll get to you. For the rest of you, God bless America.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Well, I know this is going to sound lame, and some of you may judge me for this, but today's a big day. Today, obviously, is America's birthday, Independence Day, and it is a huge day for fireworks. And, I like fireworks as much as the next guy, but not any more than the next guy. I think if you're going to watch a professional fireworks display, obviously the one in our area today that gets the most attention is the Macy's fireworks display, but there's also a lot of other really impressive fireworks displays run by professionals. I think that's great, right? However, I am dead set against the use of fireworks, but both in areas where it's legal for amateurs to shoot off fireworks and areas where it's illegal. And I used to get a big kick out of this when I was a boy, both having a sparkler myself and being able to wave it around and kind of draw letters in the air with the sparkler. It was fun. I also enjoyed seeing, older relatives or older neighbors stand in the street and shoot off bottle rockets and all sorts of other things and explode things and see a loud boom. I really enjoyed it. But I was 9 or 10. I mean, I do not understand the obsession that so many adults seem to have with setting off fireworks. I don't get it. And I've known so many people that have gotten hurt with, with the use of fireworks in both in areas where it's legal and in areas where it's illegal. And why people risk doing this for what? A loud boom? Some pretty colors? I think it's the most silly thing in the world. There's a lot of great professional fireworks displays. Watch them, enjoy them. But for these homemade fireworks displays, to me, it's the most juvenile thing in the world. This year in our area has not been as bad as, say, 4 years ago when they were shooting off fireworks for weeks leading up to and following Independence Day. I have seen more and more people where I live shooting off fireworks, but it hasn't been as bad as it was in recent years. It is a nightmare for pets. If you have a cat or a dog, when you're watching them, this is the worst day of the year for a dog or a cat. When you're watching them hide because they're terrified of all the what sounds like Fallujah happening outside. And you're watching them hide under a bed or a sofa because they're really terrified. They're really scared. They don't understand what's going on. Do you think, wow, I hope the 45-year-old man that's launching these M80s is really having a great time? Why should all the dogs and cats in the neighborhood be terrorized because somebody wants to blow up some stuff? I think it's great to celebrate America in any number of ways, including fireworks. But I do wonder if the people that spend so much time, effort, and money, quite frankly, acquiring these fireworks and setting them off, if they do anything else, either today or any other day of the year, to celebrate America or make it a better place. Because I think for a lot of people, all it is just an excuse to blow up things. And I don't think that's right. And last year, my son is going to stay up a little later this year, but last year, my son was 1.5. He was going to bed around 8:00. And I watched this poor kid struggle to go to sleep and cry as he's trying to sleep over the cacophony of booming noises all over our neighborhood. And as I'm listening to my son cry and then unable to get my own nap because I have an odd sleep schedule too, I'm thinking, how many other people are in this position that are now dealing with an infant that's not able to sleep because it's Pearl Harbor outside? I think it's the silliest thing in the world. So I've done a little research on this. And, somebody that went to town on fireworks was the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. And, I asked him one time, what is it about, the fireworks? Was that all just kind of an ego match between you and John Gotti? Because, you wanted to make sure, John Gotti was very well known for his fireworks displays, particularly in the Howard Beach section of Queens. And he said, absolutely not. He said the first trip that he ever took to a hospital after the 4th of July and all of the children that he'd seen injured with blown up hands, blown off fingers, then that made him dead certain that he was never going to have any sort of tolerance for fireworks. And I've come to think that that's the right philosophy. People may disagree. That's my view. Additionally, so I did a little research on this, and fireworks cause wildfires. Lots of them. Not one or two, lots of them. Fireworks sparked an estimated 31,302 fires in 2022 that caused about $109 million in direct property damage. That's according to Michelle Steinberg from the National Fire Protection Association. Now, again, I like fireworks. You go to Disney World, it's fun. At the end of the night over Magic Kingdom or Epcot or wherever they show off those fireworks, it's fun to see the fireworks in the air. It's a lot of fun. I have nothing against fireworks. But is the value that we get for a good time with fireworks, is it worth 31,000 wildfires? I vote no. There's also a lot of evidence to suggest that fireworks contribute significantly to air pollution, land pollution, water pollution. And I see it when I walk the streets on July 5th. Because the old adage, you don't go forth with a fifth on the 4th. Otherwise, you may not come forth on the 5th. But avoiding a fifth on the 4th, I do go forth on the 5th. And I walk the streets and I see the streets littered with spent firework casings. And I think of the damage that it does to freaking out household pets. And I wonder what it does to wildlife. And it turns out I don't have to wonder, because in a 2023 paper, Professor Bill Bateman of Curtin University studied fireworks impacts on animals and found both immediate and long-lasting effects. Why do we need animals breathing in or taking in this toxic haze of heavy metals and pollutants and getting shell-shocked because somebody in suburbia wants to blow up a 180? So I am not a firework enthusiast, not by any stretch. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. So my advice to you would be to avoid fireworks, enjoy a professional fireworks display. But if you absolutely have to ignore my advice because you think I'm lame or a loser or whatever else, just please be careful. I had one bartender who, he was a very good bartender, and he ended up with such bad burns. I haven't seen him in years, but his name was George, great guy. And he ended up with such bad burns because of a firework. And I think they might have been permanent, but they were all over his chest and his neck because of the way something that he was holding blew up or fired off. And it's, I don't know, is it worth it? I vote no. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. Let me tell you what's coming up shortly. We are going to talk with Elliot Ackerman. Elliot Ackerman, if you're not familiar with him, he is a brilliant writer of both fiction and nonfiction. And whenever I see his byline anywhere, I don't always agree with him. In fact, very often I disagree with him. But I always know that whatever he's written is going to be really compelling. And I came across this op-ed that he wrote, or this column that he wrote in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, all about how Disney World was an incredible ripoff and such a great time for him and his family. And I really empathized, having just been there in March for the first time in a while. I really empathized with so many of the things that he was saying. And it just so happens that Elliot Ackerman has served 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, knows a thing or two about national security and the military. He just wrote a book with Admiral James Stavridis. So I'm curious to get his take on what's going on in the world and with the military. But he enlisted in the military and served in combat when he didn't have to. I don't know if you remember his father, Peter Ackerman. He died a couple of years ago. But Peter Ackerman, and I imagine his son, were quite wealthy. And even though this is someone that had every advantage in life, he, Elliot Ackerman, still chose to enlist in the military. And that's a lot more than I ever did. So that's one of the reasons I strongly admire him. And he's just a terrific writer. I don't know when he found the time to learn how to write like he does, but he's a great writer. Hey, let us welcome our listener of the week, Roger in Massachusetts. Roger, did you get my email today or yesterday?
This is news to me.
Well, so we should revoke your listener of the week status
okay.
because you weren't listening enough.
Okay. Thanks. Right, that's interesting.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Well, I emailed you. Well,
I'm kind of surprised because I don't call in a whole lot. I don't do the social media thing.
All right,
you emails once a week.
You've talked me out of it, Roger. Maybe you're a poor pick for listener of the week.
Well, anyway, thank you though.
You're welcome. All right, what's on your mind, my friend?
The reason I just called is that on the one hand, I'm surprised I don't hear about this much, but on the other hand, I still think it's worth the warning that children, loose clothing, and sparklers do not mix.
Yeah, I think, you could just say children and sparklers don't mix.
Well, no, the clothing. My mother watched her older sister die that way, and a long time ago, and waving something, and something catching her, because those things are quite hot.
Yeah, no kidding. You're holding around basically a mini torch. Yeah, I mean, wait. So your aunt died from a sparkler incident?
Yeah, she back in those days, of course, girls wore cotton dresses, and she's waving the sparklers. My mother recalls, and the dress caught fire. Oh. And her grandfather was trying to roll her in the grass and put her out. And I thought to myself, I wonder. I don't hear any incidents of it, but I would think that it would suffice, to warn folks to be aware of something like that.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, Roger, that's kind of what I'm trying to do here by encouraging people not to use fireworks, and if they do use them, to be careful. Roger, thanks for sharing that story. Hopefully people take it to heart. 646-720-0635. Heidi is in the Boogie Down Bronx. Hi, Heidi.
Yeah, hi, Frank. How are you? I just overheard with these fireworks. I have to be very honest with you. I am absolutely terrified of them. I was even usually on, I really don't like, July 4th is a nice holiday, but sometimes I wished, it would be over because I'm literally sometimes afraid to go outside. And what's the worst? People I know, they laugh at me. They think, oh, you're afraid of fireworks. I find that not very nice and not very sensitive when somebody is afraid of fireworks. And I really do believe they are dangerous.
Well, they are dangerous. It's not a question of belief.
Because people, amateurs, they don't know what they're doing. They get them from Connecticut because they're not legal here, and they let them straight up into the air. They could go left, right. I think they're very dangerous.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. People die every single year with there are thousands of injuries every single year. I think it's horrendous. It's a very natural thing to be afraid of. But I don't know that you should hold it against the whole holiday. I think instead we need better enforcement in places where fireworks are illegal, and we need to encourage people not to use fireworks and set them off on their own. I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying a professional.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Well,
people are, do you remember during COVID? I remember I called up 311, and the lady, you know what she told me on the phone? She said, why won't you wear a helmet?
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. That was around you remember 2020?
Yeah, no, these fireworks.
I know. Yes, she told me, why won't you wear a helmet? I couldn't believe she said that to me.
No, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Heidi, thank you. I appreciate the call. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here because I know a lot of people really enjoy them, and I think that's great. But why not just enjoy the professional fireworks displays? And if you can't get to a position where you're watching the fireworks, it's a wonderful thing to watch on television. I remember several years I would watch the Macy's fireworks display, and they would show these fireworks with the most beautiful music. And it's great. It's a really wonderful blending of sight and sound to see these fireworks on a screen over music. I think it's great. It certainly beats trying to breathe through the smoky haze of a post-fireworks day. 646-720-0635. We'll talk to Elliot Ackerman shortly. Tony, you disagree? You want to weigh in here? I feel like you have a view that you want to share.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I haven't dealt with fireworks since I was 14.
Right, because you're an adult.
Okay, and I get, the fireworks display is not, I could take it or leave it. It is what it is, but some people just don't know how to act when it comes to fireworks. Because I've done some childish things as a kid with fireworks. And then when I was 14, I almost had a bad incident. And after that was a reality check. And I never messed with fireworks ever again.
Well, you hate to say it, but you were lucky. It could have been a lot worse.
Yes, it could have.
But again, I understand the allure for an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. My son is 2, and he had me put on fireworks on television. And he likes to watch the video of the fireworks. I get it. But what are you doing as a 50-year-old, 60-year-old, going out of your way to,
maybe they're just trying to relive their childhood.
Maybe that's what it is.
Which is stupid to me. But hey, do something else. Get a Harley Davidson or something.
There you go. I like that. 646-720-0635. We got Elliot Ackerman coming up in a moment. And a couple people have been holding. Let me try and get to them. Al is in New York City. Hello, Al.
Good evening, Mr. Morano.
Hi.
I had a question. Politics. Is it possible that Trump could pick RFK as a surprise pick for VP. Is that possible? And what would Mr. Kennedy bring to the ticket?
Well, I think it is possible, and the rumor was that Trump was interested in doing something like that and had some surrogates reach out to Kennedy about that. And that was something that my friend Roger Stone was promoting for a while. I think at this juncture, it's incredibly unlikely. Kennedy had rebuffed the earlier entrees from Trump to do that. And I think, honestly, not that Trump necessarily cares, but I think Trump would have a very difficult time selling that to some of the more conservative elements of the GOP, given Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s environmental activism, given the fact that he's pro-choice, given the fact that he's pro-gun control. I think he'd have a tough time selling that to the Republicans.
But with his votes and name cachet, as opposed to some of the other names, just it rings kind of nice. Trump Kennedy, it has a nice sound to it.
I hear you. I hear you. And the thing that maybe you're aware of, and maybe this is what prompted the question, is his daughter Ivanka is obsessed with the Kennedys. Ivanka named all three of her children. I think it's three, either two or three. Named all of her children after Kennedys, right? And they are obsessed with everything Camelot. And I think they got that a bit from Donald Trump. I think he really does, like a lot of that Camelot mythology and a lot of that stuff. I think it's very unlikely at this point. But you never say never when it comes to Donald Trump. I think Trump also doesn't want anybody that would risk overshadowing him at all. That's why I think it's much more likely that he'd pick someone that was a bit more bland, someone like a Doug Burgum, for instance, or a Tim Scott that doesn't necessarily rub anyone the wrong way. But in terms of what effect it would have electorally, Al, honestly, I think especially these days, people vote for the top of the ticket. I don't think it matters who the running mate is for President Trump. I think the only case this year where it may matter who the running mate is if President Biden stays in the race, because, it's clear that he would not finish a second term, unfortunately. So I think that's an instance where the running mate may matter, but I don't see President Biden staying in the race. All right. Elliot Ackerman joins us straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Happy Independence Day. I can't think of anyone I'd rather talk to on Independence Day than Elliot Ackerman. It has nothing to do with the fact that I agree with him on a lot of things. In fact, I haven't gone through the issue checklist of issues that he feels this way on and I feel that way on. But I suspect that there's a great deal of issues that we disagree on. Nothing to do with that at all. Has nothing to do with the fact that he is an award-winning writer of both fiction and nonfiction. It's quite impressive. But best-selling authors are pretty common, even in America. Admittedly, not quite so many bestsellers as Elliot has managed, but it has nothing to do with that. It doesn't even have anything to do with the fact that he served our country and is a decorated veteran, serving 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, winning medal, getting awarded medal after medal, citation after citation. When, given his socioeconomic status, I don't think this was a decision that he had to make. He served our country and put his life on the line because he loves it. But it's because so much of Elliot Ackerman's work involves civic virtue and calling upon Americans and America to do better. and to be better and to appeal to our better angels. So on this Independence Day, I couldn't think of anybody that I'd rather talk to than a true patriot, former Marine and intelligence officer. He's also a contributing writer for The Atlantic, a best-selling author whose latest book is 2054, which he co-authored with Admiral James Stavridis. Elliot Ackerman, it's great to have you back on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Frank, and thanks for that very kind introduction.
No, it's certainly true. Now, let's get the important stuff out of the way. Who do you like in the hot dog eating contest today with Joey Chestnut out of it?
Geez, I'm still sort of mourning the loss of Joey Chestnut, and I kind of look back to the great Halcyon days of the great Kobayashi. So I don't know if there's one person I'm completely behind. Maybe like the presidential race. I don't have a horse to back yet.
Fair enough. And by the way, that you mentioned Halcyon, that's another one of your books that I happen to have read, which I can't recommend highly enough, and a very clever way to get in an advertisement for Halcyon. Great book. People should check it out. All right. You brought up the presidential race. Let me ask you about that. President Biden is at least giving the impression to the public that he is going to be staying in this race. He's doing this interview with George Stephanopoulos on Friday. It's going to air on Sunday. That's apparently meant to reassure people that he is able to continue until November. Give me your take on the situation involving President Biden. Do you think he will stay in the race, and do you think he should stay in the race?
Well, I think the only person who knows whether or not he's going to stay in the race is President Biden and that very immediate circle of family members. I mean, ultimately, it is his decision to make. I mean, he has the delegates going to the convention. Nobody can force him to not run for president at this point. So it's very difficult to know what decision he will ultimately make, except to just be cognizant of the fact that there's only one person pulling the strings there, and that's going to be President Biden. Whether or not he should stay in the race, I think what we've sort of seen in the last year, is something that on the one hand is very remarkable, but is also something that sadly is all too common, which is that just people, human beings, very, very rarely voluntarily let go of power. And a year ago, if President Biden had announced a press conference, stepped up to the dais, said that it was time for a new generation of American leadership to step onto the scene, that he wouldn't be running for president again, that he'd taken the country as far as he could. I think at least within his party and people on the left and those who are his supporters, he would go down in history as being a hero on par with Cincinnatus and honoring the legacy of George Washington and the ability to, willingly relinquish power, which is an amazing thing. And he didn't do that. And I think what has made this, I'll speak for myself, but I think what's made, the day since this debate so remarkable is I think, many Americans probably have felt this very strong sense coming out of the White House and his campaign that any questions of his suitability, of his competency, was off limits, was completely inaccurate. Don't believe your lying eyes. And everybody saw it at the debate. I mean, it's very, very obvious. And so I think people feel like they've been lied to. And I think the Democrats have got a lot of answering to do. And I think the Democratic Party has been grossly derelict. And I think a lot of people in the media have been grossly derelict. And there's been a negligence there, because if you're in the media, your job is to push and ask questions. And people just were very happily not asking questions because, they don't like Donald Trump and felt that to ask those questions might potentially harm Joe Biden's reelection prospects. And ironically, by not asking those questions a year ago or 18 months ago, they might now usher in the very president they don't want, which is Donald Trump. So I think I think who's going to win, or whether or not who is Joe Biden going to run. I mean, I think only Joe Biden knows that. But should he run? What are the moral implications of him running? I think what we've seen is just a massive dereliction of duty on the part of many institutions in American life, the Democratic Party and the Fourth Estate.
If people are just tuning in, we're talking with Elliot Ackerman. He's the New York Times best-selling author of the novels Halcyon, 2034, Red Dress in Black and White, Waiting for Eden, Dark at the Crossing, and Green on Blue, as well as some great nonfiction work as well. He served 5 tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he received the Silver Star, the Bronze Star for Valor, and the Purple Heart. Elliot, the last time we spoke, I asked you your opinion of the no labels movement, because you were involved in something around 2012 that was sort of a predecessor to no labels, but very similar to it. It was called Americans Elect, and it was another effort to nominate a bipartisan ticket. This election features the major party nominees, assuming President Biden is still the presumptive nominee, the Democratic Party, who are more unpopular than any 2 major party nominees since polling began. And apparently about 25% of the country views themselves as what pollsters describe as double haters. And you would think this is a tailor-made election for a group like Americans Elect or a group like No Labels. No Labels went ahead and got ballot access in 20-something states. They raised tens of millions of dollars. Apparently, they couldn't get any of the top-tier candidates that they were hoping to get to run with them. You actually predicted this. The last time we spoke, you said your experience with Americans Elect was we tried to go with the if you build it, they will come model, and we underestimated how difficult it was to get people to, step outside of that 2-party box. During the debate itself, as folks were watching the debacle of Presidents Biden and Trump, so many people were saying, where's no labels? We could use a no labels option right about now. How could we have an election with 2 major party nominees so unpopular among large swaths of the community and no centrist alternative, putting aside Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but no centrist alternative like a no labels candidate?
Well, I think, we spend a lot of time in our national conversation bemoaning the fact that we are such a divided country. And there is a lot of truth in that. But the one issue in which the vast majority of Americans are united is that we feel that our political class, the Republican and Democratic parties, are no longer capable of putting forward appealing candidates. And we've seen that several election cycles now. And we've really reached the height of it with, as you noted, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And so, power has a tendency to congregate and then to never distribute out. And so you see just sort of this continual consolidation of power at the top. So, for instance, if we look at the Democratic side, we have Joe Biden running, but Joe Biden's presidency in many ways has been a continuation of the Obama presidency. So many of the key officials are former Obama alumnus. So, at that point, we're talking from, really 2008 to 2024, a straight line which the power streams have not been broken. And if we look at the Republican side, too, the power that Trump has over the party after assuming the presidency in 2016 continues. And the 2 parties are disincentivized to have any type of competition outside of the 2 parties. And I think we shouldn't be surprised when time and time again, the American people are served of candidates that aren't appealing. And the only thing we all seem to agree upon is that we would like some type of other alternative. And I'll just end by saying, too, that's another alternative when we're existing in a political system where our 2 major parties are actually both minority parties. Majority of Americans now, not just the plurality, but actually the majority are political independents. That doesn't mean that they are a monolith, but these are people who do not identify with either of the 2 major parties. So what does it say about our democracy where the 2 major parties do not represent the majority of Americans?
Well, and I fall in that category. I'm an independent, and I've always pointed out that, hey, we're the plurality, now the majority, and it's a shame that we have an electoral structure that doesn't respond to the wants, needs, and desires of the public, but gives you a lot to scratch your head over and a lot to shake your head at. All right. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, aside from the fact that it's Independence Day, and to me, you're the kind of person that just exudes patriotism, is I caught your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, happily paying a mouse's ransom, in which you talk about going to Disney World and how it made you feel like a sucker, and then reluctantly you felt the magic too. Now, I took my 2-year-old to Disney in March for the first time, and I can empathize with a lot of what you wrote here. Let's talk about this. Why did Disney make you feel like a sucker?
Well, I'll back up and just say the assignment for this column is it's in a column to write about something in which you changed your mind. And so my wife and I, our children are getting a little bit older, and we recognize this was sort of going to be our last opportunity to take them to Disney, in which they would go willingly and the magic would still be there. But I think both she and I were loathing it a little bit, anticipating that we were going to, go down to Orlando and just get completely fleeced and shaken down by Disney Enterprises. And although that happens and it's a very, very expensive trip, and we're lucky to be able to go, I walked away feeling it's really just remarkable. I mean, it's a remarkable achievement. I was sort of really taken by the fact to think that, does America do we still build things this big anymore? That this is a country where I hope we still have the capacity to do this, but it was certainly a country where, at times people have had real visions and have made those visions into a reality. And there was a moment when we were at Epcot Center, which is, built as a sort of a city of the future. I was sort of walking around with my kids, and I was thinking, I felt such sort of this strange, disassociated pride that I am an American, and in a place like America, Epcot Center was built. And I could only say it was maybe analogous to the type of pride a Frenchman might feel when they're walking around, Versailles, which is also completely over the top. But they say, someday, we built something, palaces like Versailles. And I can imagine that, maybe in 200 years, people might walk through Disney World and say, isn't it amazing that these people built this place? So I kind of very much left Disney with my mind changed, and glad that we had taken our kids to just, so they could see that, that America is a place where people can have really big dreams and take really big swings and make things as remarkable as what they've built down in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. And for people that haven't been or are contemplating, wondering whether or not they should take their children for the last time, even though everything is super expensive, aside from the pride in something august and grand being built, and you walking among it, what did you guys as a family, or even just your children, kind of enjoy the most? What would you categorize as sort of the biggest highlight of your trip there?
Well, I mean, I'll just caveat by saying I'm not shilling for Disney.
Understood.
At all.
Understood.
I'm not like a Disney guy. But
neither am I, which is why I value your perspective.
Yeah. But I think it's I think it's interesting sometimes. There's the old truism that there's two fish and they're swimming along, and one fish looks at the other fish and says, "How's the water?" And the other fish says, "What's water?" And I bring that up because, we as Americans sort of, we swim in our culture, and we're not even kind of aware of the culture and the monuments that we have built. And so one of the things I enjoyed about, aside from going on the rides and seeing the characters and, doing all the Disney-esque things that one does, just to walk around with my kids and tell them, well, this is the story of how this place was made. This is this is who a guy like Walt Disney was. One of the things I found very sort of moving was, all of the cast members at Disney, they all, depending on what sort of town you're in, they all wear a different costume. So, if you're like in Frontierland, they're dressed up like, cowboys. And if you're in, Pirates of the Caribbean, there are all these pirates wandering around. But when you go to Main Street USA, there are two costumes they wear. One is sort of a polka dot dress, which is what the women cast members wear, and one is like a kind of an old timey suit. And one of the cast members explained to me that the reason they wear that is the dress and the suit that Walt Disney and his wife wore on their first date. And I was thinking, it's just sort of the evolution of that is just sort of amazing. That we live in a country that's very much. I mean, the core tenet of our country is that individuals have individual freedoms and the right to pursue their dreams and happiness as imperfectly as that sometimes occurs. But that ultimately the core of Disney are these two individuals who had this remarkable vision and were able to execute it. And so I was happy for my kids to see, look at that. That's a remarkable example of someone taking their vision out to the furthest horizon of what you could imagine. And I think my kids, that resonated with them.
Yeah, no, that's what a great observation. And I can't imagine after hearing that description how you got to be an award-winning writer. I mean, really. We're talking with Elliot Ackerman. His latest book is co-authored with Admiral James Stavridis. It's called 2054. I'm going to ask you about that in a second, Elliot. One quick addendum to what I was mentioning earlier, that George Stephanopoulos interview. Apparently, ABC just announced that it's actually going to be airing in prime time Friday night. And to their credit, ABC News is actually going to be releasing an unedited transcript of the interview as well. So we'll be tuned in for that on Friday. What are you guys doing today for Independence Day?
We will be one of my great friends from the Marines works for the city and of New York City, and he and our families will be spending Independence Day together, and we'll catch the fireworks.
Wonderful. Well, great. Well, I think that'll be a lot of fun. Quickly, tell me about your book, 2054. I think everybody knows Admiral James Stavridis, the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And while it's fictional, it deals with some very real changes to technology and warfare technology. It's the kind of thing that we talk about on this program a great deal. What's this book about?
2054 is the second book in a trilogy. So the first book was 2034, which imagined a war between the U.S. and China in that year. And 2054 imagines a civil conflict in the United States in the year 2054, but it also imagines the role that artificial intelligence would play in one of those conflicts, and the role that artificial intelligence will play in our democracy. And how AI can shift our sense of reality. So the book opens with the assassination of a U.S. president, but there are two very divergent theories about who or what killed the president. And this all takes place in the year 2054.
In the nonfiction world, how big of a potential for danger is artificial intelligence? We're seeing more militaries, including our own, move increasingly towards AI. It seems like this is just a tremendous recipe for a mistake and some sort of major disaster. How concerned are you?
Well, this is part of humanity, right? What makes us humans? That there's always when new tools arrive, there's always this sense that the tool is going to replace the human being, and that anxiety. And that's not a misplaced anxiety. I mean, you can get all the way back to the Industrial Revolution, in which industrialization replaced many humans and changed the way that we work. But we also have to understand that the tools are actually what make us human. I mean, that's core to being a human being, is that we make tools. And so AI is a tool. That being said, it will destroy the old ways, but it will also usher in the new ways. So I think it's, the question is not, is it a danger? The question is really, how is it going to change us? Because it's coming no matter what. And then specifically, in the military space, what we're already seeing is that with, things like the processing of intelligence, it can really speed up analytic processes there for like targeting, for, image analysis. So we are already seeing that. But then, when we kind of get out to the most further elements of that, it's the idea of, could you have, automated weapon systems, in which AI is able to very, very quickly make decisions on whether or not to launch munitions on, you can imagine an unmanned vehicle powered by AI that is armed, and that unmanned vehicle could, if it sees something that matches a certain criteria, launch a missile at it. Now, the U.S., for instance, has already put protocols in place saying that any type of AI-powered or unmanned vehicle that has a lethal capability, there will always be a human being in the loop before it executes that lethal capability. But many of our adversaries might not have those same types of ethical constraints, and I think those are some of the questions that are going to be coming down the pike. Is sort of, how does the U.S. wage war versus how do our adversaries wage war by leveraging AI in ways that we believe are ethical and aligned with the values of our country.
Lastly, and I hate to end with such a potentially downer question on a holiday, but I have to take advantage of your national security expertise. Satellite images showed suspected Chinese electronic spying bases in Cuba, and apparently one new construction is just 70 miles from Guantanamo Bay. That's according to an analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. A lot of people pretty concerned about this. The Wall Street Journal reporting that this is a major escalation in China expanding its influence into this hemisphere. What's your read on this situation? Are people right to be concerned?
I think people are right to be concerned. China does not wish the United States well. They are our chief adversary. We are certainly, if we're not in a Cold War with China, we're certainly in the foothills of a Cold War with China. And in the next 5 to 10 years, the stakes couldn't be higher. And our country is going to need very, very steady and thoughtful leadership. And we're at a moment this year where we're going to pick who that next leader is. Imperfect as the process has already been. And after we do that, I think it's incumbent on all of us as Americans to come together and support that person, because that person's success is ultimately all of our success.
Well said. Well said. Elliot Ackerman, people can check out the book, the book 2054, or any of his previous work by going to elliottackerman.com. That's the standard spelling of Ackerman and 2 L's in Elliot, as everybody but Elliot Spitzer uses. Thank you so much, sir, and I hope you and your family have a great Independence Day.
Great to be with you. Thank you, Frank. Likewise to you.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can feel free to give me a call. 646-720-0635. 646-720-0635. I would venture to say there's not another interview in only 15 minutes in all of radio that can cover serious national security issues, the hot dog eating contest, Disney, and the presidential race in that span and with such substance. I'm sure some of you have issues with what Elliot said. 646-720-0635 if you do. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
All right. Tomorrow, I am not going to be here. You will be treated to the dulcet tones of Jumpin' James Flippin. Now, James Flippin he asked through a mutual coworker of ours, he asked, can Frank give me the number for the guy from Ancient Aliens? And I'm thinking, it took me 4 or 5 months, maybe more, to try and get Giorgio Tsoukalos on. And here's his number. You can get him one day. And then, so I did give him the number, and it's great if he wants to come on. But then he said, well, are there any other good alien guests that Frank could suggest? And I'm thinking, like, wouldn't I use those guests for when I'm here? In my whole life, filling in for radio people, I've never ever asked, could you give me some suggestions for guests? Book your own guests. Keep asking questions.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
So this hour, good morrow, everybody. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. This hour is about to get interesting because, well, I mean, hopefully the whole hour is interesting because of the content that I have carefully curated to hopefully bring you a lot of information and entertainment. But it's going to be interesting because at the bottom of this hour, we are scheduled to talk with Chris Carosa. Chris Carosa is an interesting guy. He is a hamburger historian, a grill master, a backyard grill master, knows more about hamburgers than anybody, knows about the history of the hamburger, knows all sorts of strategies for making the best hamburgers. And I'm betting he knows all about other things that people might be grilling today. And today's a big barbecue holiday, 4th of July and so forth. But here's what's going on. I responded to a publicist who I've used before. Stacy is her name. I responded to her email asking, is he available? I saw the pitch that she had sent me, I think a while back, and I thought it sounded interesting. The guy has an MBA. He's a Yale educated person who has dedicated his life, at least in part, to hamburger history. So I get an email yesterday morning asking if he's available. She writes me back, it's a great question. I'll check with him and let you know ASAP. And I didn't hear anything back. So then she sends me an SMS text message at 3:22 p.m. yesterday. Saying, 4:40 p.m. Hey, just making sure you saw that Chris Carosa is confirmed for the time that you asked, 30 minutes past the hour, this particular hour. And I hadn't seen that email, but I figure because I hadn't gone through my email yet, I go through every email in the order that it was received. And you'd be amazed at how often that blows up in my face. Because I end up missing emails that I should see and that are kind of urgent because I will only go through 10 emails at a time before I do a task and they've got to be in order. So I say, wonderful. Thank you. Looking forward to it. Whenever you can, would you be able to email me a headshot that we can use for graphics and any social media handles that we should tag? Okay. That's at 4:57. I say, thank you. 5:53. Emailed the photos. Okay. Still didn't get to an email. I figure, okay, I have hundreds of emails to get through. Maybe that's why I didn't see it. So then right before the show, I go and try to find this email with Chris's number. Can't find it. And instead, I see one of my responses to her saying, thank you. I get a mail delivery system failure. So I'm thinking there's some issue with Stacy's email here, and she tried to send me an email with all the pertinent information, and it didn't go through. That's what I'm thinking. So I thought it would be a nice thing, 4th of July weekend, to do a nice, barbecue themed segment. But then I figure, okay, I just won't mention it. Plenty of other things to talk about. A lot of folks want to chat about all sorts of things. Great. But what if this gentleman, Chris Carosa, this hamburger historian, is prepared to be on the show and is, working on being on the show, and all of a sudden he calls in? Then we're in quite the pickle for that. I did not promote it. So I'll say this. This is where it gets interesting. In 20 minutes, you will either hear an in-depth, intelligent hamburger discussion, or you won't. That's the best thing I can tell you to look forward to in terms of this hour. All right. In the meantime, there's a lot of folks that have wronged others. And those are the folks on this week's list of...
The Other Side of Midnight presents Denunciations.
I must begin by denouncing a U.S. medical professor who manipulated data for an Alzheimer's drug trial. Yes, that's right. Huo Yan Wang fabricated data included in grant applications to the National Institutes of Health on behalf of himself and a publicly listed Austin, Texas-based pharmaceutical company for which he was a consultant. That's no reflection on the good people of Austin, Texas. The NIH awarded Wang, who's a professor at CUNY, by the way, CUNY Medical School, around $16 million between 2017 and 2021. Boy, if I could get $16 million, would I fabricate data? I'd certainly be tempted to. But Professor Wang, I do denounce you. I must also denounce Gene Whitefeather and Donald Lance, a white West Virginia couple that adopted 5 black children, ages 6 through 16, from a shelter for homeless and vulnerable youths. Now, you might think, well, why? Why would you denounce a couple that's adopting 5 children that want and need a home? Well, because they essentially adopted them and used them as slaves. They targeted them for forced labor, according to a 16-count indictment, because of their race. They are being held in jail in West Virginia. They and if they're found not guilty, I will absolutely withdraw this denunciation. But the children were forced to essentially be slaves. They are charged with human trafficking, child neglect, forced labor, and more. I think this is just terrible. The couple's accused of abusing the children, and this is just reprehensible. How anybody could do this to anyone, but especially to children, is something I'll just never understand. Gene Whitefeather and Donald Lance, I do denounce you. I must denounce the vandals who damaged more than 170 gravestones at 2 Jewish sections of a cemetery in Cincinnati. This is awful. This act of vandalism left 176 gravestones damaged in 2 West Side cemeteries in Cincinnati. The 2 sections of the Coverdale Cemetery complex were targeted apparently because they were Jewish people that were buried there. Jewish Cemeteries of Greater Cincinnati is struggling to contact the families of those whose gravestones were damaged. You know, even if you're an anti-Semite, what do you gain by vandalizing a gravestone? Does that make... I mean, how does that help you or anybody else? How does it even hurt the Jews? All it does is be just disrespectful to dead people. I just don't get it at all. Speaking of anti-Semitism, I have to denounce The three women, including, by the way, a Drexel University professor, but the three women who were stealing pro-Israel signs from outside a synagogue and a home in Lower Merion Township, Pennsylvania last year. And it has nothing to do with these signs being pro-Israel. I would denounce anybody that's stealing any sort of signs, and I have repeatedly. But one of the people was Sarah Prickett, 39. Another was Sam Penn, 25. And investigators said at the time there were recent reports of religious signs being stolen or defaced in Lower Merion Township. So the police were investigating, and they found a third woman, later identified as Mariana Chilton, 56 years old. That is the Drexel University professor. So to all of the people that are stealing signs, pro-Israel and otherwise, I do denounce you. I must also denounce Nevada, the state of Nevada, and I hate to do that because there's a lot. We're on 6 stations in Nevada right now. We're on KDAWN in Las Vegas and the 5 stations that make up the Nevada Talk Radio Network, and I love the people of Nevada. But what I'm really doing is denouncing the state government of Nevada, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is my guy, he submitted a petition to get on the ballot in Nevada. The Nevada officials said, "Oh, no, you don't. There's no running mate on here. We're not taking it." Now, he hadn't named a running mate yet. Neither had Biden or Trump. And there's a long history of Nevada allowing you to put a running mate on after you name one. But they said, no, petition's invalid. So they're litigating that in court. But what if they lose? They don't want to have this be the only state they're not on the ballot in. So now he has submitted a second Nevada petition. His first one didn't list anyone for vice president. He sued and his case is unresolved. But then he spent the money to do an entire new petition. All the stuff that they're putting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. through is designed to drain him and his campaign of resources. The fact that he doesn't have Secret Service protection still, and he's forced to spend millions of dollars on security, that is designed to drain him of Secret Service protection. This frivolous lawsuit to throw him off the ballot in New Jersey, the frivolous lawsuit to throw him off the ballot in New York, it's all designed to drain him of resources so he can't actually campaign. It's really reprehensible. I mean, if the state legislatures in these states were so concerned about splitting votes and wasted votes and the spoiler effect, what they should do is institute ranked choice voting. But if they really thought their message and their guy was the best, or gal, they should just make the case to the people that folks should vote for that person. But all this cheap trickery, it's despicable, quite frankly. So, Nevada state government, I do denounce you. I must also denounce these Nigeria bombers who left at least 30 dead, more than 100 injured in multiple suicide bombings. And apparently this was the first attack carried out by a woman that anyone's aware of in Nigeria, first suicide attack. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. The first suicide attack was masterminded by an unidentified woman who sneaked with 2 children into a wedding reception of a popular young man in Gwoza. It's one of the provinces there. And she detonated her IED, killing herself, presumably her children, and many people. A few minutes later, another suicide bomber sneaked into a burial ceremony nearby and detonated improvised explosive devices. And then the third explosion just occurred a few minutes later. This is just horrible. These are desperate acts of terrorism, and my heart goes out to all the people that were killed and the people that were injured. So to the bombers, whatever your gender, I do denounce you. And I must also denounce Kendall Cemetery in South Florida. A family looking to pay their final respects to a loved one arrived to find that someone else had already been buried in her grave. That's right. Leodon Delgado said the burial for his 93-year-old grandmother, who died on June 23rd, was scheduled for July 2nd. So Delgado got there at 2 p.m. and found that the plot was already occupied. Quote to NBC Miami, "We discovered that another person has been buried in my grandmother's space, and we are very offended." Yeah, I would think so. "We feel very bad because right now we have nowhere to bury her." I mean, that's a nightmare for a family. Poor family is already grieving, dealing with the loss of a loved one, dealing with the loss of a matriarch. And here we are. Can't even bury her. Horrible. So to Kendall Cemetery, I do denounce you. I must also denounce the Nebraska man by the name of Jason Hornady, whose car was clocked at 151 miles per hour. But it wasn't just that he was driving at a dangerously high speed. He was driving drunk. And in a wonderful act of synergy, do you know what his blood alcohol content was? 151. So he was driving 151 and had a blood alcohol content of 151. You should never drive with a blood alcohol content of 151, nor when you're driving 151 miles per hour. Jason Hornady, I do denounce you. I must also denounce Mary Jo Bailey. Mary Jo Bailey is an 81-year-old woman who has been convicted of a killing that went unsolved for decades. They convicted her of first-degree murder in the 1985 death of Yvonne Menke, and he sentenced her to life in prison. Imagine that, 81-year-old getting life in prison. Judge said he had no discretion, mandatory minimum. The case was cold for almost 40 years until it was reinvestigated starting in 2021. And the criminal complaint detailed how Bailey and Menke were dating the same man at the same time. So Menke told her daughter, December 12, 1985, that she was going outside to warm up her car before work. Her daughter heard what sounded like a whip-like noise, And thinking it was gunshots, she looked out the window of the apartment. She saw a person walking and then jogging away from the scene, wearing a gray dress coat, scarf, and stocking cap. Menke was found dead at the bottom of the stairs, going from the apartment to the street. And apparently, this was Miss Bailey. The reason I wanted to highlight this story is because I think it's important, with murder being a crime with no statute of limitations, that people see, even if you get away with it for 40 years, that doesn't mean you're always going to get away with it. Sometimes, not every time, sometimes the long arm of the law will come for you and you'll have to pay the piper. All right, penultimately, I want to denounce Vietnam National University. You know, as a short person, I find this very offensive. I can understand being too short to go on a roller coaster. I can't understand being too short to study. And yet, no matter how smart you are, there's little any student who's short can do about a minimum height requirement for this one university program. Oh yes, the School of Management and Business at the Vietnam National University in Hanoi believes the connection between height and success is so significant that people who are supposedly too short should no longer be allowed to study. The school announced that female students must be at least 1.58 meters tall and male students at least 1.65 meters to be considered for admission this year. This is ridiculous. This is blatant height discrimination. I don't dispute that the tall people do better in many aspects of life, but I think some of that might be due to the way they're treated by the rest of the world or the confidence that comes with being tall. I'd love to be tall, but just was not for me. And I don't think that this is a nice thing to do. So, to the School of Management and Business at the Vietnam National University in Hanoi, I do denounce you. And finally, I want to denounce another Florida man, Kenneth D. Wade Jr., who was arrested Thursday and charged with grand theft and practicing veterinary medicine without a license. A woman said that he pretended to be a veterinarian and refused to return her dog after the animal died in his care. This is horrible. So, this woman's dog, Pitbull, named Gucci, became sick in August of 2023. The woman takes the dog to Quincy Animal Hospital. There, medical professionals told her the dog had a stomach obstruction that would have to be passed through a bowel movement or through surgery. The dog's owner said it was too pricey, so she looked into other options. A friend told her to contact this fellow, Wade, who went by Pit God Wade on social media and occasionally posted about his work with animals. The dog's owner reached out to Wade and explained the issues her dog was having. Wade said he could help her for $350 total, but she had to pay $175 up front. She paid and took the dog to Wade's home. She dropped the dog off with a kennel, food bowls, and a leash, and never saw him again. And then he refused to return her because she didn't pay the balance. Guy is a real lowlife. He is a grade A sickola. Kenneth Wade Jr., I do denounce you. All right. We have gotten a hold of Chris Carosa, which is exciting. I am looking forward to this conversation. And if you are manning a grill or womaning a grill today, I think you're going to be very interested in what he has to say. We'll get into it straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American.
Lee Greenwood singing a patriotic classic. Proud to be an American. God bless the USA on this July 4th. And it's not just Independence Day, but it is the birthday of Robert Auth, Assemblyman from New Jersey, and our friend Joe from Ronkonkoma. And both of them selected this song as one of their birthday bumper music selections. So it was meant to be. Well, Independence Day involves a lot of celebrations, parades, fireworks, you name it. A lot of celebrations of America, waving the red, white, and blue. But a big part of America is also the barbecue. A big part of celebrating America on the 4th of July has turned to getting together with friends and family for a cookout. Celebrating and getting together with people that you care about, or in some cases, people that you're just getting to know, people that might live in the neighborhood, and grilling up some Frankfurters or that classic American delicacy, the hamburger. So I thought maybe you could use some tips. And if there's one thing that's better than a tip, if you're like me and you're a little bit pretentious and you're a little bit of a know-it-all, the one thing that's better than a tip every July 4th is to be able to insert a fact about whatever you're seeing or consuming. In this case, the hamburger. Enter Chris Carosa. He is a hamburger historian, a backyard grill master, a Yale graduate, an award-winning writer and author. His books include Hamburger Dreams. Chris Carosa, I'm glad we got a hold of you. It was not quite as difficult as your detecting the mystery of the history of the hamburger, but we had our challenges. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, and happy Independence Day.
Likewise, Chris. So I got to ask you, you're a pretty accomplished guy. Went to Yale. You've got an MBA. You do a lot of other things that don't involve hamburgers. How did you get into hamburgers as a subject matter?
Just a really funny story. I actually majored in physics and astronomy as an undergraduate, and at the end of my senior year, I had an extra slot for a class. And I had a bunch of classmates who were doing architecture, and they convinced me to take this course on the study of the city. They said, Chris, you don't have to worry about it. There's no exams. You just have to write the biography of the city you were born in. I was born in Buffalo, and in the process of doing the research for that paper, I found something that said the hamburger was invented there. And I was pretty excited because I never heard that before. I rushed down and told one of my classmates, hey, guess what? The hamburger was invented in Buffalo. And he says, no, it wasn't. It was invented right here in New Haven. And he promptly took me to Louis' Lunch, which is where it was supposed to have happened, and bought me a hamburger there. And I had a Louis' Lunch hamburger. And since then, I was kind of curious, well, what's the real story? I mean, this wasn't a curiosity that really didn't get resolved until about 35 years later when I ended up writing the book on it.
So, I mean, obviously we want people to check out the book, Hamburger Dreams, and folks can check it out at hamburgerdreams.com. But give us an idea. What was the real story? When was the hamburger invented, and where was it invented?
Well, I'll tell you, just my approach to doing this was like I was trying to solve this classic cold case. I mean, so cold, no one was around anymore to interview. So I had to go back to the original stories, that the various origin stories, the people who told them. And I said, okay, can I find evidence, not from what they said, but what would support or refute what they said? So it was really easy. I started out as Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes says, oh, you eliminate the impossible first. So all these stories have dates. So all I did was I went back to old newspaper articles and tried to find the earliest possible mention of a hamburger, or back then it was really called a hamburger sandwich. And I was able to go back to 1893 as the earliest newspaper article that I was able to find that talked about it. So any origin story that happened after that obviously was false because they were selling it. So unfortunately for New Haven, they got eliminated on the first round there. It ended up coming down to two 1885 stories. And again, there was a lot of detail with both stories, more with one than the other. But the first thing I did is, I saw the fairs where these were supposed to have occurred. When did they occur? Which one occurred first? And so if both stories were true, then obviously the fair that happened first would be where it occurred. And then I had to say, okay, well, how do I know that it's likely that would be true? Now, the one that I ended up identifying as the most likely one happened to be at the Erie County Fair. That's the one outside of Buffalo, New York. And the Frank Mencius, there's two brothers, Frank and Charles Mencius from Ohio, came to the fair, and they were selling pork sausage sandwiches. They ran out of pork, The butcher refused to slaughter a pig because he said, I couldn't sell a whole pig, and it was warm, and I didn't want to ruin a pig just so you can have 10 pounds of pork. Take some ground beef instead. So I looked up a lot of stuff, and it turned out all these secondary sources, primarily newspaper reporting from that year, sort of confirmed everything that Frank Mencius said when he retold the story in the early 1920s.
Wow.
Most of these stories were retold decades after they occurred. And it just appeared that one was the most logical story, the most supported by the evidence story. The other 1885 story, unfortunately, the one detail, this is Charlie Negreen, Hamburger Charlie out of Wisconsin. He said, the very first time I sold the hamburgers, I went to this fair, then I went to this other fair, and I went to this other fair. So he went to 3 different fairs in a specific order. And the key thing of that specific order was he lost $10 in between the second and third fairs. And on his way back home, he just, reversed his trail. A farmer found the $10 and gave it to him. So that's the story he told. This is like 49 years later. He's telling this story, and it is printed in a Green Bay newspaper. Then something really cool happened. 2 weeks later in that paper, an 80-year-old farmer said, I'm the guy who found the money. Now, Charlie Negreen didn't know the guy's name.
Sure.
Who found the money. So this farmer says, I'm the one who found this money. Now, that is about as close to a smoking gun as you can get. Here's the problem. The order of those fairs, those 3 fairs, is critical to the story. The earliest year that could have happened was 1891.
Ooh, interesting.
So it doesn't mean that Charlie Negreen didn't do the hamburger in 1885, but the story that he told couldn't have occurred until 1891 at the earliest.
So the hamburger was either invented by Charlie Negreen in Wisconsin or by Frank Mencius in New York.
Charles and Frank Mencius. They were brothers. And if they were both invented in 1985, then the Mencius brothers
1885.
get the 1885. Sorry, you're right. The Mencius brothers get the award because the Erie County Fair occurred about a month before the Seymour Fair in Wisconsin.
And
here's the other thing: is like I actually worked at the fair. I worked at the Erie County Fair when I was a kid, and I never heard of this story. It's really weird, and I'm trying to figure out. How did they find this story out? Who was the first person to find it out? Haven't figured that out yet. But one of the things I noticed at the fair when I was working there is there's these vendors that travel along the fair. So it's, they go from one fair to another, and they always share stories about what works. And then, the other vendors try to copy it. So it is possible, because we know the Mencius brothers were traveling in that fair, in the Midwest fairs. It's possible that the story of their success with the hamburger could have filtered up to Charlie Negreen in Wisconsin, and he just duplicated what they did. Or, it's also possible they both could have had the same idea at the same time.
Well, that seems a little unlikely. And in the Charlie Negreen telling of it, was his sandwich also called a Hamburg sandwich?
No, he never really gave it a name. This is another reason why I think that the Erie County Fair idea is better. So Charlie Negreen, he was selling meatballs, and he squashed the meatballs, and that's what became the hamburger. That's how he told the story. The Mencius brothers, like I said, they were selling pork sausage sandwiches. They had a switch to ground beef. Now, at that time, ground beef was considered a very plebeian food. It was not something that you bragged about. In fact, most of the recipes that I looked at that time that included ground beef, they were medicinal recipes.
You're kidding.
So
not even meatloaf.
President Garfield died, I think, in 1881.
We can't blame his death on eating too many hamburgers, though.
No. But as he was dying, they were giving him food to help him better, and one of the things they gave him was ground beef.
Oh, wow.
So this is what I mean, that at that point it was medicinal, And if you, that's not very appetizing. It doesn't sound like something that you want to talk about when you're eating, especially if you're trying to sell it at a fair. So a vendor came, or a satisfied customer came up to him and Frank, and this is Frank telling the story now. He says, "Hey, what do you call this thing?" They didn't have a name for it. They just did it out of the blue. They didn't have a name for it. And he said, "We call it a hamburger sandwich." Okay. So it's not made out of ham. This is the question everybody asks. How did he come up with the name Hamburg? Well, the Erie County Fair, although it was originally in the city of Buffalo, Buffalo got too large and the fair got too large. So the fair had to go in the towns around Buffalo. Ultimately, it settled in this one town, and it's still there today. The name of that town is Hamburg, New York.
So, I mean, that would seem to make sense if that was the etymology of the sandwich, that could have been where it was invented. So whether the hamburger was invented by Charlie Negreen in Wisconsin or the Menches brothers in Hamburg, New York, how did this go from being a novelty food at a fair to then becoming the multi-trillion-dollar industry that it is today? When and how did the hamburger really take off?
So let me rephrase that question to a better question: is why the hamburger? Why not the hot dog?
Right.
The hot dog came about before the hamburger. By the 1880s, 1890s, the hot dog was a staple of baseball games. So, by the way, you have all these foods, what we would today call fast foods or novelty foods or concession foods that you can imagine when you go to baseball, football games or whatever. So that was just starting in that era. The culture was going to these fairs, they're going to horse races, they're going to baseball games, and they needed something to eat. They needed something to eat that they could eat while they were walking around. So sandwiches were the way to go. So that was really what inspired this popularity just of that style of eating. Now, how did the hamburger surpass the hot dog? Haven't been able to figure that one out exactly right now, but I do know this. If you look at the fast food restaurants, now we'll think of things like McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King today, but when they started, it really started with White Castle in the 1920s. So if the hamburger was invented in 1885, and it's really not until the 1920s that you see this the growing popularity of fast food restaurants, that gave a lot of time for the hamburgers to really catch up and surpass the hot dogs. The part of the reason why I think hamburgers might have been more popular than hot dogs is hamburgers tend to be generic. It's just ground beef. I mean, anybody can do it. Whereas hot dogs seem to be more regional. In other words, there's a manufacturer of the hot dogs. Hot dogs are a fully processed sort of thing. Hot dog is a product that you make. So everybody makes it a little bit differently. If you go from different parts of the country, from one part of the country to another, you'll hear about hot dogs that are local hot dogs. They're in Rochester, New York, it could be Zweigel's hot dog. In Buffalo, it would be Saleen's. In New York City, it might be Nathan's. So you have these brand name hot dogs, and it's harder to come up with fast food restaurants or franchises when you have to buy the hot dog and the hot dog has a name associated with it. Whereas hamburgers, just buy the ground beef from anywhere.
Interesting.
You can do it that way.
Interesting. Now, we're talking with Chris Carosa. He is the Yale-educated hamburger historian and author of Hamburger Dreams. If you're interested in that book, you could check it out at hamburgerdreams.com. Chris, are you pretty proficient in finding your way around a grill? Also, would you consider yourself a real expert in terms of grilling hamburgers and maybe other barbecue-related foods?
I would say I'm an expert in my own backyard, but I don't want to claim that I'm some sort of culinary expert in that aspect. If anything, my mother would be. She's the one who's a trained home economist. I'm just a historian. But in terms of making my own hamburgers, I know what I like and I know how to make them. And it is my job to cook the hamburgers at home. My son cooks the steak. He's learned how to perfect that, and he also cooks the hot dogs, by the way. But I cook the hamburgers.
So your interest in the hamburger is mostly limited to the academic pursuit of the hamburger and the intellectual pursuit of the hamburger, and less about the preparation and serving and the mastery of the culinary experience itself.
Yeah, I mean, I know obviously the history of some of how it evolved. Like, for example, the cheeseburger. When did the cheeseburger get invented? Well, it's credited with being invented in the late 1920s or early 1930s out of either Southern California or Kentucky. If you look at newspaper stories from that era, you will see the term cheeseburger used for the first time in both of those areas. However, the idea of putting cheese on a hamburger was not new. If you look at newspaper articles or descriptions of how food trucks prepared hamburgers in the late 1800s, they include putting cheese on the hamburger. So almost from the very beginning, even before the bun was used, because the bun came a little bit later, cheese was put on hamburgers. Now, the term cheeseburger, however, wasn't used until the 1920s or 1930s, and that's where I think the claim could be made in terms of who coined the name cheeseburger. And again, if you look at the newspapers, just based on that, they first appeared in California, but that doesn't mean that you didn't have two people coming up with the idea of cheeseburger at the same time.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. First of all, cheese goes with everything, right? So it's not a shock to me that once a sandwich was established, somebody would have the idea to throw a little bit of cheese on there, and then maybe it takes a little while for the term itself to catch on. I guess that makes sense. I don't know if you saw the photograph of Senator Chuck Schumer grilling a cheeseburger the other day, or maybe a week or two ago, and he basically is putting cheese on a raw beef patty. As someone that even is an amateur burger preparer yourself, Chris, would you ever suggest that that's the best way to prepare a cheeseburger?
Probably not. You got to cook the hamburger first. The thing is, if you did that, by the time the hamburger is cooked, the cheese is liquefied, right, and it would probably just spill off the hamburger. I mean, I know, like when I make cheeseburgers at home, that's a challenge. The hamburgers are already cooked, so I'm putting on the cheese at the very last minute, and if I wait a few seconds too long, it's melting off the hamburger.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, if you do that on a raw hamburger, I don't think the cheese is going to be still there. Now, how do you flip it over? You can't flip it over.
No, to me, it's insane. I mean, that's why I think it was just done for a photo op. I can't imagine anybody ate that cheeseburger. Talking with Chris Carosa, author of Hamburger Dreams. Chris, do you have a preference for a particular brand or style of hamburger, either to prepare yourself when you're grilling or to when you're going out and ordering a hamburger or a cheeseburger somewhere? Is there a certain brand or type that you're partial to?
Well, I like the hamburgers that I make at home, and this is going to betray my Italian heritage, but I put garlic and onion and mint and, a little bit of black pepper inside and mix it all up, sometimes parsley too. No oregano though. And so I mix it. It's not quite a meatball because it doesn't have breadcrumbs or anything in there, but it's probably got a lot of the same spices that meatballs have. And, gee whiz, as I'm describing this to you right now, my mouth is watering. That's how much I like these. But that's what I do when I cook it at home. When I'm going out, it really doesn't matter that much. I'll eat a hamburger anyway.
Chris, my wife is mostly a vegetarian. She doesn't eat meat, and I'm not a big red meat guy either. So there's been an explosion in recent years in things like plant-based burgers, especially with the advent of the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger. When you have a barbecue and you have folks like my wife who are vegetarians interacting with folks like you who are carnivores, can those two groups interact and be friends with one another? Or is this the kind of thing where it's like the Hatfields and McCoys? The plant-based burger people have to, kind of deal with their own people, while the old-fashioned hamburger people, the beef patty folks, deal with their own people?
I've never seen this as an oil and water sort of thing. It's, people will bring what they want if they prefer a veggie burger or a turkey burger or something like that. A lot of times they'll bring those, to the cookout, and nobody even talks about it. It's just, so you're eating that. Who cares?
There you go. Well, that's what we like to hear, especially on Independence Day. People not being divided by their choice of burger. Chris, thank you so much. I learned a great deal and had a lot of fun talking with you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you. You can check out Chris Carosa at hamburgerdreams.com. He is actually an expert in a lot of other stuff as well. Maybe someday we'll tap into his expertise in those areas. But for today, we're sticking with the hamburger. If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life.
This is a little bit of a peculiar version of this song. Matt Blaze played it. It's not bad. It's not bad, but this is a great song. Real American by Rick Derringer, one of the most patriotic songs ever written. In fact, people were saying that if the Star Spangled Banner became too controversial, that they were thinking about making this the new national anthem, which I think would be a great choice, honestly. All right, 4 minutes till the top of the hour, 646-720-0635. Let me say hello to Steve in Gravesend. Hey, Steve.
Frank, McDonald's used to run two conveyor belts with steak to a chopper, and one would be a fatty conveyor belt, one would be a lean conveyor belt. This is for their hamburger. They wanted to maintain the ideal taste, which I wish I could have asked your guest, 30% fat. That's what they wanted. So they would drop the piece of steak on the table and take a picture, and they count pixels. And when they had more than 30% white pixels, they would feed a lean steak. When they had less than 30% pixels of white, they would feed a fatty steak.
I mean, it sounds like they had it down to quite a science.
Yeah. I actually met the original Ronald McDonald in Brooklyn at the first ever McDonald's in 1968 in Brooklyn, on Nostrand Avenue and Avenue W.
Wow.
And I met the Hamburglar, too.
Hopefully you kept your eye on your wallet.
Well, I did get to pinch his nose.
No, that's exciting. Thank you.
But that math method, you're a gambler, right?
I am.
It's called the Monte Carlo method.
Oh, the Monte Carlo method.
And what you do is, let's say you have if you have a tic-tac-toe board, each square is 1/9, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you're a surveyor and you're looking at a golf course, and the guy who owns the golf. Listen, I hired them to put this much percentage green, this much percentage water, this much fairway. I want you to check it for me. And what the surveyor goes out, takes a picture from the sky, and then randomly drops peppercorns.
Steve, I'm sorry. I'm out of time.
You gotta go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
I appreciate it. Have a happy Independence Day weekend. All right. Well, there you go. Stephen Graveson. Keep asking questions.
This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Here we are, Independence Day in America. No other country I'd rather be in. And that is the God's honest truth. I look at what is going on all over the world, and it makes me appreciate how lucky I am to be in these United States. If you look at what's happening in Nigeria, death toll from a series of suicide bombings rising. If you look at what's going on with Israel and Gaza, situation speaks for itself. If you look at what's going on in Afghanistan, any which way you look, you see we're pretty lucky to be in the United States. But one of the things that we were always, I don't know if taught is the right word. One of the things that was always repeated, especially when we're children, even in schools, I don't know if they still do this in school, is that America is the greatest country in the world. It's drilled into us from such a young age that you almost don't even question it. Well, what else could be better than America, or the United States of America, to be specific? Canada, Mexico, France? The UK, by the way, the UK is having their elections today. Not looking good for the conservatives over there, the Tories, the Conservative Party. And it's looking very good for Labour. It's also looking pretty good for Nigel Farage's Reform UK party. And Farage, well, whatever. We'll have a discussion about the British elections on Monday because I am interested in that. But we'll put that aside. There was a show about, what years? About 12, 13 years ago, called The Newsroom. Really interesting show, especially if you are interested in the news media, and especially if you like Jeff Daniels. It was an Aaron Sorkin show. And I thought it was great. I think it only lasted maybe 2 or 3 seasons. It didn't have the staying power of some of his other shows like The West Wing, but it was a great show. Really interesting, especially if you were into the news or politics, of which I was. And I don't know that it would hold up as well today, because really in the post-Trump era, everything that was standard about the news business has kind of been turned on its head. Now there is no standard. There's nothing that you could show on cable news other than maybe somebody deviating from the official party line of the globalist agenda of folks that run the world like Tucker Carlson used to. that would really surprise you, right? I mean, there's nothing you could put on cable news that people would say, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe blank." But anyway, at the time that this show came out, it was a little bit of a different era in cable news. And in the first episode, Jeff Daniels is a news anchor, or he's a news anchor that's pretty straight-laced. I don't think he was giving his opinion at the time, and he got very good ratings. And he's appearing on I don't know if they're at a college, it's been a while since I saw this, but they're at a college something. And he's up there with a conservative pundit and a liberal pundit, and there's another moderator moderating the discussion. I don't know if it was a media personality or the dean of the communication school or something along those lines. So it would be like if I'm interviewing who's a Kristen Welker and who's a big liberal pundit, James Carville, and a conservative pundit, Mary Madeline, right? I mean, I don't know if Mary Madeline is still relevant as a conservative pundit, but whoever the conservative pundit du jour is. And there's a question from the crowd, which I think is particularly relevant to exploring today on Independence Day. I'm going to play you the question and a little bit of what the conservative says and a little bit of what the liberal says. This is from the Aaron Sorkin show. It's courtesy of HBO's The Newsroom.
Can you say why America is the greatest country in the world?
Diversity and opportunity.
Lewis? Freedom and freedom. So let's keep it that way.
Well, the New York Jets. No, I'm going to hold you to an answer on that. What makes America the greatest country in the world?
And ultimately, what transpires next does become a pretty key plot point, not only in that episode, but in the story arc of that whole first season. But what I thought might be interesting on Independence Day, it might be interesting to actually answer that question, the very question that student posed.
What makes America the greatest country in the world?
And I would love to hear your answer. And the answer can be, it's not, right? That's what one of the characters in that show ultimately says. It's not the greatest country in the world. I'll give you my take, but first, I don't want to color your perspective by giving you mine before folks weigh in. So I will ask you the question, and I would like you to weigh in at 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. What makes America the greatest country in the world?
A question. Since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question.
And if you call in at 646-720-0635 and answer the question that it's not, then explain to me why. Why is it not? Is it not because people end up in bankruptcy and poverty because of medical debt? Is that why? Is it not because we have all this gun violence? Is it not because of because we're bombing all of these other places? Explain to me why. You can use those answers, but I'm just putting those out there as examples. 646-720-0635. Coming up in about 15 minutes. We normally do the Gnome's News that you can use segment, but Gnome Layden is not here today. Instead, sitting in for Gnome and filling in on all his duties today is the one and only Liz Rattoballi. Now, I am a big fan of Liz's work. She's a terrific news anchor, and she has a very great way of being informational and sounding conversational at the same time. She doesn't sound like she's talking over your head. She doesn't sound like she is, sounds like she's somebody trying to give you information. So we're going to invite her to sit in for Gnome today. And I'm not going to bring this up while she's on the air with me because, I don't want to embarrass her or anything. But this is the first time that I've ever said anything like this on radio with a coworker. But I have known Liz since she was 5 years old. 5 years old. And it really is a a mind twist to have somebody that you remember running around the radio station at 5 years old now being, basically an equal, a coworker and a colleague, and really a distinguished news professional. And, I don't feel old. I've never really felt old. I still feel like a child myself, honestly. But I think if I was ever to feel old, that's right up there in terms of the reasons why. But I want to hear your answer too.
What makes America the greatest country in the world?
646-720-0635. Joaquin in Pennsylvania. Happy Independence Day. You have an answer for me, Joaquin?
Yes, I do. I think it's going down the toilet, but real quick, I had a female German Shepherd that loved fireworks.
All right, Joaquin. So it's going down the toilet, so it's not the greatest country in the world then.
Well, hang on. I'll tell you why. MAGA is like the new third party, and unfortunately, right now we're going down a track where everything is going into the leftist Marxist agenda.
All right. Well, it sounds like a pretty great country so far, the way you describe it.
Yeah, it has been, and hopefully we can bring it back again. But you take a look at everything that they've been doing to Donald Trump and to anyone who is on the side of, make America great again, putting political prisoners into jail. And even January 6th has been totally misrepresented, and the truth has never really come out about it. And my family history goes back to Nazi Germany. And again, my grandfather was executed for helping undesirable people.
So just to be clear, Joaquin, to put a button on this, that America is not the greatest country in the world because of everything that you said, the persecution of Donald Trump, the persecution of the January 6th people, and the Marxists and the leftists. That's why America is so crummy.
It's not crummy. It's on the verge of becoming totally crummy. But yeah. I mean, what's going on right now is just,
all right. I appreciate your answer, Joaquin. Thank you. I give him credit for answering honestly. What do you think? Is America the greatest country in the world? 646-720-0635 this Independence Day. And if the answer to that question is yes, then why? 646-720-0635. Robert is on Long Island. What do you think, Robert?
I think America is the greatest country in the world. And before someone can really answer that question, you have to travel. And I've been to, since the 60s, I've been to Caribbean, to Europe, to Asia, to the Middle East, and even my woke millennial daughter who lived overseas, she was so happy to come back. She lived on the southern coast, the northern coast of Spain for about a year. And when you appreciate, and then also 17 million immigrants or illegal aliens, whatever you want to refer to them as, and more are fighting to get into this country that defies that something is good, regardless of all our negatives and positives and devices and crime and whatever. People are fighting to come to this country.
Mm-hmm.
So the resounding answer, regardless of how you feel, will always be yes. And I was traveling about 10 years ago in Sharjah, which is outside of Dubai in UAE. And there was a man sweeping the road in the middle of the desert. And when I got off the bus and I talked to him, and, as long as I don't open my mouth, they think I'm African. But once they hear the accent, they go, oh, you're from New York, you're from the USA. And he said he would do anything to bring his family to the United States. And I said, why? I mean, you're in a rich Arab country. He says there's nothing like the freedoms and the liberties and the things you take for granted. Here, we take for granted that no other country has.
Well said, Robert. I love that. That's I think, a great answer. Thank you, Robert. 646-720-0635. Tim is in St. Louis listening on KMOX. Tim, what do you think?
Oh, hey, Frank. I started thinking, what makes America great? And I kept I couldn't come up with an answer. So I finally thought that what makes it great is its potential for catastrophic failure. Is that a crazy idea or what?
Take me through that. I don't know that I'm following you.
I don't know if I'm following it either, but it just seems like it's an experiment that's always striving and inventing itself.
All right. Okay. I think maybe I'm getting an inkling of what you mean. I think that kind of goes to part of my conversation with Lindsay Chervinsky yesterday on where America was in 1796 when John Adams became president. A lot of folks weren't even sure the country was going to survive, and yet here we are. Thank you, Tim. Let me say hello to Nick, listening on WCCO in Minneapolis. Hey there, Nick.
Hello, Frank. So I think the reason America is the greatest country in the world compared to some third world countries or something like that is there are people that are fair and nice to each other, and especially as a blind person, I feel as though people, how do I say this? People sort of give me the benefit of the doubt on certain things, like, for example, Frank, if I ever came to New York or if you ever came to Minnesota, you would see people describing certain things to me, like where things are at the grocery store or what things look like. I mean, I don't know if you can understand that, but would you think that was weird if I met you, let's just say you came to Minnesota and I met you and the person that was helping me said, now Frank's wearing I think that's very nice. Nick, I'm just going to put you on hold and ultimately end our discussion because it's driving me crazy to hear the show back. And if it's driving me crazy, I can't imagine what the listeners are going through. I appreciate that. But I'm not just talking about comparing America to the third world or to countries that are impoverished. I am saying greatest. I got I think it was a banner or something that Carmine made around Father's Day, and it says the world's greatest dad. And when he presented it to me, I said, I don't know that I can accept this. I don't know that I can live up to that title of world's greatest dad. I feel, really unprepared to accept this honor. So when we say greatest, we're saying greatest. And if America is the greatest, why is it the greatest? I enjoyed some of the answers that the previous caller gave in terms of, and this is sort of part of what I was thinking, what other country are people literally dying to get into? There's a lot to be, I want to hear more from you. 646-720-0635. Lisa is in Connecticut. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I traveled, I'm a very well-traveled person, and, I was away for touring for a long time, and when I came back, it was like, oh, thank God I'm back. I went to a lot of different places, and a lot of really cool places, but there's no place like home, there's no place like America. I'm really, really thankful for everything. Our democracy, everything, freedom of speech, we get to do whatever we want, and I don't know. I just think it's a really great country.
It certainly, it certainly is, Lisa. Thank you. Appreciate that. The feeling. Well, first of all, we don't get to do whatever we want, but the feeling that Lisa described about coming home after you've been abroad and feeling a sense of relief, I feel that same way, and I'm not sure if that's uniquely American. Or if I was French or British or Canadian, I would feel that way when I got to any of those countries as well, when you've been abroad. I think maybe there's a little bit of both to that. Danielle in Brooklyn. What do you think, Danielle?
Hi, Frank. Long time no speak.
Yeah, we missed you.
America is, okay, I think this is like a two-part answer. Mm-hmm. America is the greatest country because it is the most beautiful country. Even though we're a young country, we have the most beautiful landscape. Like we have mountains, we have deserts, we have, the only thing I don't think we have is a rainforest. But it's gorgeous if you ever drove cross country. Now, the thing is, it also is a great country because it's the one country that you can have so many rights while being in jail. Like, I feel like everywhere else in the world, like if you go to jail anywhere else in the world, like you're screwed. Like you're not, like there is no, like you don't have no rights. You don't get fed 3 square meals a day. And it can be pretty bad. You ever see the movie Midnight Express?
I have, and that is right on the money. But you can look at prisons in a lot of different places around the world, and you're right; they're not exactly being well taken care of. If this was Russia or China, you'd be having a tough time.
So just by what we do with the prisons, that's like how well we do, like how well we treat people that are in prison. They treat the law-abiding citizens just as even better. So you can make the comparison, like how good we treat prisoners, the people here get treated even better that don't break.
I like it, Danielle. Danielle, thank you. Well done. Happy Independence Day. Joe, what do you think? Is America the greatest country?
I think it's a beautiful landscape and topography. However, the final nail in the coffin that ended America was the COVID lockdowns. This is not a free country. Masking students, giving them an injection, mandating an injection with no informed consent. That was the end of America. And also, it doesn't have a free press, Frank. There's an alternative press, but it's not a free press. Look at Tucker Carlson. He can never say what he's saying now when he had that Fox job,
But why? I mean, look, the fact that he's still broadcasting on new media or on the internet,
right?
It's not as if he's being silenced. We all can listen to him if we want.
Right. But to say that the press is ideal, that the accounting's right, we used to have even in business, everybody should follow our accounting, global accounting, international accounting, and look at all the scandals we've had with accounting. Major corporations paying zero tax. So I think we're as a country, the most hypocritical.
All right. Well, I get it, Joe. Thank you. 646-720-0635. Eric is calling from Finland. Hello, Eric.
Hey, what's up, Frankie? Listen, you were saying that people are dying to get in there. I know. I'm living in Europe, and people are dying to get in here every day. The same kind of freedoms, maybe.
That, Eric. But
I said shifty.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Eric, so give me your answer to the question. Do you, especially someone that's living abroad, do you think America is the greatest country in the world, and why or why not?
Yeah, I think it's the greatest country in the world because it accepts everybody. But there are other places that have similar freedoms, and it's pretty damn good. I grew up in New York City and Queens, and I moved back to Europe at a certain point. It's pretty good here. I like coming back, and I'll just say America is the greatest. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. 646-720-0635. Sean in Virginia, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the greatest country for a lot of reasons, and I'm so glad that the owner and the owner's son of your radio station picked such a good team of talk show hosts that tell the truth and sound like America in the old days in World War II that rallied together and fought. My father was in World War II, and it shortened his life. But I can tell you, you are still my favorite talk show host in that place. And I'm not saying that to kiss up to you. When Pat Robertson died down here,
I had nothing to do with that.
People liked him. I mean, he died. Mm-hmm. And you said something nice about him on the radio show that really got my attention about his name, and everything. And people criticized him. But he was a guy that was kind to everybody, and people liked him. And they had a lot of great people in this country, and they're going to come back and be great again.
Well,
but I think the show that y'all have is a great thing for America.
Well, Sean, so far I agree with you 100%. Thank you. Alex is in Hampton Bays, listening on WLIR. Hey there, Alex.
How's it going, Frank?
It's going.
One of the reasons I think America's great, and don't laugh at me, is Naked Cowboy. There is literally a guy who woke up one day, picked up his guitar, and he's like, I'm going to be Naked Cowboy. And he's doing okay for himself.
Oh, I mean, better than okay. He's wealthy.
What a country we live in.
See, I love that. What a great answer. I love that. And I think you really put your finger on the incredible opportunity that there is in a country like the United States that's lacking in, say, a country like India, for instance. Thank you, Alex. Nothing against India. Chris in the Catskills, what do you think?
Good morning, Frank. It's a nuanced-based answer, but I agree with elements of what three of your previous callers said. Had a conversation with the Naked Cowboy 12 years ago in Manhattan. He's an avid listener of talk radio.
I know. He's probably listening right now. Yeah.
His favorite host was Michael Savage, but I agree with the caller that said our vast, beautiful expansiveness is unparalleled. That's the greatest. Obviously, we have the greatest talk radio hosts like yourself and Curtis in the world, the greatest talk radio, the greatest entertainment, greatest professional sports. However, we don't have the best healthcare system. We don't have the best infrastructure. We don't have the best educational system, although we have the highest concentration of colleges and universities that everybody's coming for. Our jurisprudence, criminal justice system, American law school professors will tell you we have the greatest legal system. I think that's very debatable. Do we have the most efficient and effective government? I think that's debatable.
I don't think it's debatable. I think the answer is a resounding no, in my opinion. Chris, thank you. I want to get in at least one more person here because she's been holding a while. Viviana in Brooklyn, give me your answer.
Wow, a lot of things I agree with. I believe that America is the greatest experiment that God ever initiated. When I think of the Pilgrims and even Christopher Columbus wanting to come to America, especially when they thought that they might be off the map.
Should I tell her that Columbus didn't know he came to America?
They just kept on coming. And that freedom of religion, where we are saying we're one nation under God. You think about the 10 Commandments, that was the basis of our judicial prudence. And although that we've lost a lot of that, I believe there's hope we can return. You can become whoever you want to be, potentially. You have the Bill of Rights, where you have your freedom of speech. You have the right to defend yourself. There's checks and balances in the government because of our Constitution. Ingenuity, innovation. We're the most generous nation in the world. We give more to people in disaster in the world than anyone else. And then there's the potential, like they mentioned, for upward mobility. Yeah. And that we change our government usually by vote.
Viviana, thank you. Thank you. I don't mean to cut you off there. I think that was a great point in terms of worldwide generosity. And that was something that nobody else had mentioned. The thing that I'll mention, I agree with much of what everybody said. First of all, I think America's government is awful. I think there is so much to be changed. And when I say it's awful, I don't just mean we make poor decisions. I mean the structure of the government is a mess. It's not conducive to democracy or democratic values or anything like that. I think there's a lot of problems with it. I think it's debatable whether America is even still really a democracy, to be honest. I think, in my view, what makes America the greatest country in the world, aside from the fact that you have people literally dying to come here, is America's place as a symbol, as a worldwide international symbol for freedom,
for liberty, for a haven to escape persecution. I don't know that in the history of the world, honestly, from the Roman Empire to the present day, there's ever been a country that is so known as a symbol of all that's right. And I think part of America's struggle is that we always strive to live up to that image and try to make that symbol a reality. But I think that symbol is just such a wonderful aspiration for all of us that live here and for all of us, all the people around the world that want to live here. About 20 years ago, and this is the last thing I'll say, during the Iraq War, I met maybe about 19 years ago, I met a person that had been held captive in Iraq. And I wish I could remember the person because he was an interesting guy, and I'll find him because I want to invite him back on the air. And he described how he was held captive by Iraqi, militants, basically Islamic jihadist insurgents. And they would threaten to kill him. Pretty serious stuff. And when his other fellow guard was not in the room, that guard was asking the person that he was holding prisoner how he could get to the United States and get a green card and live there and start a new life. It wasn't to come to America and be a terrorist. He wanted to come here and be an American. Think about that. People that were so into being jihadists in the Middle East, they were aspiring to come here and be America, which I think is really interesting. So that's where I think America stands out far and above everywhere else. Sure, America has a great economy. A lot of countries do. America has had a great cultural influence. A lot of countries have. America has a lot of great educational institutions. That's certainly true. We have a lot of great natural beauty. And by the way, I think do have a rainforest as part of a national park in Oregon. But I think there's no country that comes even close to America as a symbol for all that's good in terms of freedom and liberty. All right, Liz Rattoballi will make her debut on our show straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
It was 1989, my thoughts were short, my hair was long, caught somewhere between a boy and man. She was 17 and she was far from in between. It was summertime in northern Michigan.
Minutes till the top of the hour. This is Kid Rock singing about summer and America and all sorts of interesting things. Really interesting that he makes the point of his hair being long, because the news anchor sitting in Noam Laden's chair today has hair that is substantially longer than his, and apparently she has much more of a knowledge of popular music than Noam typically does. But I am very, very pleased to welcome, sitting in for...
Stand by for the other side of Midnight's news.
From New York City, the other side of midnight, an its affiliated stations present national and international news with Frank Morano and news director Noam Laden. Their summary of the world news and personal comments. Get the rest of the story.
Sitting in for Noam Laden is Liz Rattoballi. Liz Rattoballi, welcome. I'm sorry we don't have a custom announcer open for you.
Yeah, we need to get on that.
I agreed. I don't know what Elias does all day. The guy's been building a ship in a bottle for the last 4 hours.
Twiddling his thumbs over there. Come on.
Exactly. He and Tony, they're playing cards like Ricky Henderson and Bobby Bonilla. Liz, it's great to have you. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
I have been enjoying listening to you. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and it's great to have you. You make our show better by being a part of it, so we're excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. I'm real excited to be here.
How are you managing the hours?
You know, it's an adjustment. It's definitely an adjustment, but I've gotten used to it. I've always been a night owl, so it's honestly like a complete 180 for me. But I've gotten used to my body clock gets me up at 2 a.m. Sometimes recently I actually woke up on my day off at 5 in the morning in a panic. I was like,
that happens all the time. I have nightmares, literally, still about oversleeping. All right, it happens constantly. All right, well, since you are a night owl, there's some howling that you have to do because you got big shoes to fill. Well, actually, Noam is kind of short anyway. Give us some stories. Give us the news. Tell us what's happening.
All right. So, have you ever been to Chipotle? Are you a big fan of
My
Chipotle?
wife likes Chipotle, and I have been in there with her. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've ever noticed, sometimes when you go there and order things, it'll be different sizes. You'll order the same thing. You could have a go-to consistent order, and it'll be different portion sizes. So a Wells Fargo analyst actually studied 75 burrito bowls from Chipotle and found that there were some issues with the portion size. There were some discrepancies. There was actually a 47% difference between the heaviest and the lightest bowl.
Why do they do that? That seems terrible.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that there would be some sort of consistency, especially when you're ordering something so consistently. They said that they, chose something. They went with a specific order that was the same. They wanted to, remove any variables in their little experiment here. But, the store, they kind of explain it away like, it's whoever is working. If they have a heavy hand, they're scooping your stuff.
I guess I kind of get that. So unlike what we hear about with shrinkflation and stuff like that, this isn't necessarily something that's being done by Chipotle to rip people off in terms of the sizing, right?
No, absolutely not. The CEO, Stephen Els, actually said that they actually are usually a bit generous sometimes with their portions. Oh. Yeah, I mean, and he said that he's never seen anyone leave Chipotle hungry, which, I agree with. I've never left there hungry. I'm a big fan.
Well, what's interesting is when you picture a chain restaurant, especially, is Chipotle considered fast food? I guess it would be, right?
Definitely.
So when you picture a chain restaurant, especially fast food, you think of wherever you're going, whether it's California, New York, St. Louis, Minnesota, you would think of whatever you order is going to be basically the same. But I guess at least at Chipotle, it's not. You could order the same thing in 2 different stores, maybe even the same store, and get a different size.
Yeah, and there was one store specifically here in New York City that they said was the worst. They didn't name which one, so, there's no way of really avoiding that store, but that was the worst. So that, there is some discrepancy. There is still a lot of people, though, that go into Chipotle. They say that foot traffic has increased. The Wells Fargo analyst found that, they perform very well financially.
I'm sure they did. Now, was hearing this news at all a disappointment for you, or it doesn't affect your enjoyment of Chipotle at all?
Honestly, it does not affect my enjoyment. I still go in, I order what I want to order. I never really do the digital orders. The digital orders is actually where they found the biggest discrepancy. They found an 87.
Now, what's a digital order? They don't give you digital food.
No, it's like when you Uber Eats or like Grubhub, DoorDash, or even, sometimes now they have their own websites where they or like their own banks too. Starbucks does that where you could upload money into your specific account.
Yes,
and they hold on to your money. So now Wells Fargo, they're competing with Chipotle on a certain.
I see. I got you. Okay, well that is interesting. That's good to know. What else do we have?
So I don't know if you've ever had a robot servant.
I have not. I mean, we do have an Alexa device, but it just sits there. It doesn't.
No Roombas?
Oh, actually, we did have a Roomba. I think he broke, but I really liked it. It was very, if people don't know, it's a robotic vacuum cleaner, and it was not as good as having a human vacuum cleaner, but it worked in a pinch.
Yeah, well, robots have been taking over to do these sort of menial tasks. And in South Korea, there was actually a robot that worked in the mayor's office. And unfortunately, that robot ended up committing suicide.
You're kidding?
Yes.
Why did the robot kill himself or itself?
There really is no answer. Witnesses saw the robot sort of glitching out, circling, going in circles before it ended up jumping down a staircase.
Whoa. Did it leave a note?
I would really like to know if there was any coding, ones and zeros left in their final memo.
Well, how do we know it killed itself and it wasn't just an accident?
There really is no way of knowing. That's what people are kind of projecting onto this robot. They see it's been in a year of servitude and they say, oh, it killed itself. I
see. Well, it's also not inconceivable that the humans that are working in the mayor's office are seeing the risk of their jobs being replaced by robots, and they're trying to take issue with these robots and kill some of these robots or kill this particular robot.
That's honestly a valid point because South Korea is one of the most robotic countries in the world. There is one robot for every 10 workers.
I don't think it's a true story, but in the film Star Trek 6, are you a Star Trek fan?
I have not seen that one. I've seen a few.
Okay, that's a good one. But anyway, we learn the story, and again, I don't think it's true, but we learn the story that there was this footwear that was made of wood worn on Earth during the 19th century. It's called sabot. And when workers they saw that their livelihood was threatened by new technology, new machines that were just recently invented. They threw their shoes into the machinery to screw them up. And that's where supposedly the term sabotage comes from. Oh. But again, I don't think it's a true story, but
the story of the Luddites too.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe this was the South Korean version of the human strike back, so to speak.
I mean, yeah, and that's a fair point. The robots definitely, do they have an answer to this? Are the robots going to have some sort of response? I would like to see that.
I'm glad I'm not there too close to that. My goodness. All right, you have one more for us?
Yes, I do have one more for you. When's the last time you've been to an animal farm or the zoo?
It was maybe about 5 or 6 months ago. I was at an event at the Bronx Zoo. It was in the fall. It was around October, November.
Bronx Zoo is beautiful. It's
really
huge.
is good. Yeah, really impressive.
Right in the botanical gardens. Yeah. Gorgeous. But so there is a unique animal farm that's open in Florida, and it actually is beneath a jail.
Oh, you're kidding.
I am not. There is beneath a Monroe County Sheriff's Office opened up a farm below the detention center.
Wow. Why did they do that?
Back in 1994, they noticed that there were a bunch of ducks getting hit by cars in the space between a golf course and the detention center. So they just bought that space between and started taking in sanctuary animals.
Well, I think that's great because if you're a child of someone that's incarcerated, it's got to be a pretty stressful thing. It's great to see your loved one, but it's tough saying goodbye to them and seeing them behind bars. To be able to go right downstairs and spend some time with some ducks or something, I think that's a nice thing. Maybe it does something to help these children that are seeing their incarcerated relatives emotionally a little bit.
Yeah, no, wholesome family content. And actually, the incarcerated people at that detention center do get to work at the farm. They actually volunteer at the farm, or, it's not clear if they ended up getting a stipend from that work that they do there, but they actually get a day off. They don't take it. Most of them don't take it because they like being around the animals.
Well, that's very nice. I love hearing that, and a positive story to end our Independence Day interaction together. Liz, thank you. Please keep an eye on James Flippin tomorrow. Don't let him screw up our show. Also, and I mean this pretty sincerely, don't let them do too good of a job, because I don't want to come in here on Monday and they say, you don't actually have to come in. James is going to stay in your chair and Liz is going to stay doing the things that James does. So if you see that James is really catching a head of steam and in danger of replacing me, do like they did to that South Korean robot.
Yeah, knock him down a few pegs.
Exactly. Grab that wooden shoe and throw it to the microphone or something.
Will do.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Great
Thank
job.
you.
And now you know the rest of the story.
The great Liz Rattoballi, always a treat, and you can hear her on WABC in New York all morning long, where she does an absolutely marvelous job sitting in for Noam Laden. All right, we're going to do 15 seconds of fame coming up in about 3 minutes. If you want to start queuing up, you can. 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. I tried to get my hard drive back from Best Buy yesterday. I was unsuccessful because apparently the manager, who is the only person authorized to give me back my broken hard drive, was not in. So the saga continues. No response to my email to this manager asking for my own broken hard drive back. But I figured, let me go in there. I'm told he works 9 to 5. So I went in there yesterday with Carmine, picked Carmine up from summer camp. We go in there. And I didn't have an appointment, so you have to wait in the queue if you don't have an appointment. But I figured I'd just be able to ask for Nelson. His name's Mike Nelson, but everybody calls him Nelson. And lo and behold, he was not in. But Carmine had such a great time. He was running around this store in circles. He was loving touching everything. I'm trying to stop him from touching everything, but he's so quick. And I'm chasing him. Then there's a back area with all sorts of big television sets with all sorts of colorful things on the television sets. And he's staring at them. And I'm trying to hold him. And he's just saying, no, I don't do that. I just want to, be on my own. I want to walk. And so finally, I am able to bring him to the front of the store to try to wait in line again. And there's people ahead of me in the line. And there's one gentleman, he's a little older, not so much older though. He's sitting there waiting for his turn in the line. And Carmine is just touching things. And this guy says to me, not any of this guy's things, but the store's things. Now I'm keeping an eye on him to make sure he's not breaking anything. And the guy says to me, Al, he's real mischievous, isn't he? I said, well, he's 2. And then the guy says to Carmine, as Carmine is continuing to touch things, the guy says to Carmine, hey, remember, and he didn't say it mean, he said it with a smile, but he says, hey, remember, this is not your home. And I'm thinking to myself, am I really in a scenario where I've had a broken hard drive for 4 months? This store has had it in their possession for a month and a half. And I'm now waiting in line, struggling to get my broken hard drive back so that I can send it to someone competent. And I'm listening to my son get politely reprimanded by a stranger. And I said, okay, that's it. We have to leave because honestly, Carmine was having such a good time in Best Buy running around. He would have stayed there for hours and hours and hours. I said, I'm not going to stay here in line. It's not doing anything for us. I'll let him do one more lap running around and then we'll go. And as he's running around, one of the store employees, Wendy, nice lady, she's saying, well, yeah, I don't think Daddy wants you to run around. I said, yeah, we're going to go home. Yeah, Daddy wants you to run around at home. And then Wendy actually says to me, yeah, you don't want him to get snatched or taken, whatever she said. But the implication was if he runs around, he's going to be kidnapped. And I'm thinking, doesn't she see that I'm watching him? I mean, he's running and it's true, he is fast, but he's 10 feet in front of me. Who's going to kidnap him? He's 10 feet in front of me while I'm watching him and giving chase. And the other thing I'm thinking of is, do a lot of children tend to get kidnapped at Best Buy? I mean, clearly Wendy was very turned off by some sort of experience. And then it just so happened that we saw that same lady, Brandy, that was trying to get her hard drive replaced 2 days before when I was there. But it was an interesting day, but it was an unproductive one from the hard drive front. It was great for Carmine. He had fun running around there for 45 minutes, but still struggling to get all those files off that hard drive. All right. Why don't we do 15 seconds of fame? I'll give you 15 seconds to say whatever you like this Independence Day. 646-720-0635. 646-720-0635. 15 seconds of fame straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
I actually went long. Sorry about that. Happy Independence Day.
Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k as the stock market braces for impact. I'm Larry Kudlow, and I urge you to fortify your savings with physical gold with my friends at Priority Gold. To learn how gold and silver can help diversify your savings, please call 1-800-405-GOLD or just visit PriorityGold.com to get a free gold information guide. That's 1-800-405-GOLD.